Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It is March 30th, and we are here for a City of Mason work session. Welcome to the City of Mason. I'm Mayor Kathy Grossman. We're going to start things off with a roll call. Eric?
Councilmember Nelson,
Here.
Councilmember Chance,
Here.
Councilmember Bradburn,
Here.
Vice Mayor Gilb, Councilmember Hunterlaw,
Here.
Mayor Grossman.
Here. Okay.
I feel like I missed someone.
I feel like you missed one.
Oh, Councilmember Stricula, I'm sorry.
You didn't hurt my feelings too bad. I'm here.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are also joined by our city manager, Eric Hansen. We have our law director, Jeff Forbes. Oh, there he is. Thanks for waving. We have our assistant city manager, Jennifer Heft. And we have some guests with us today to speak with us from the CDC, Community Development Corporation in Mason. And we have Sherry Taylor, who is president of the Mason Deerfield Chamber, I'm sorry. We also have Randy Kuven, Scott Jones, and John Kramer, and I'll let them give a better introduction when they present. We also have from ICRC joining us, Jason again. Thank you very much, Jason. And let's start things off with any reminders from Jeff Forbes, and just a reminder from me about protocol. Let's keep our microphones on mute. If you wish to have the floor, just wave your hand and unmute, and I will call you. And Jeff, do you have any other reminders for us today?
No, that covers it, actually. The muting is important.
Yes. Okay. And Eric, do you have anything for us?
I don't think so that I could add to Saturday's meeting except for one update. We received word yesterday, or maybe as early this morning, that the state has altered their definition of essential business as it relates to golf courses. So expect, pending any other change, that tomorrow the golf center will be open for business.
That's great news. Okay, let's start things off with a presentation from our Community Development Corporation. Sherry, would you like to kick us off with that?
Sure. I'm Sherry Taylor. I am the president and CEO of the Mason Deerfield Chamber, as well as the Mason Deerfield Chamber Community Development Corporation. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be with you all today. But before I dive in too far, I actually just wanted to thank our city manager for his leadership. As an external partner, I felt it was really necessary to share how extremely proactive he has been. He coordinated our community leader calls a couple of weeks ago, right out of the gates, that span Mason and Deerfield Township. His compassion for our entire business community has really shined through in several ways, but we're grateful to him for his promotion of our Made to Eat Takeout Blitz program that's actually assisting our businesses and our residents right now. So situations like this can really bring out the best of people, and he is shining, and I just wanted to share that as an external partner. So I'm actually here to speak on behalf of the chamber first. So since much of what was discussed on Saturday revolved around understanding our local business needs and the prospective resource development, I thought it just might help to provide some insight into what we are currently doing, as well as what's been done so far as to maximize our efforts as we move forward. So just a rearview mirror moment. The Mason Deerfield Chamber was formed in 1968 to drive commerce into the city's central core, which most people know as downtown Mason, by brightening it and making it attractive through Christmas lights. Today, we have nearly 600 member companies spanning from Dayton to Cincinnati, comprised of nearly 30,000 employees. We're a voluntary membership organization that businesses join in order to maintain a thriving business environment and a healthy community. So we too have had to adapt pretty drastically the last couple of weeks. We're forcing ourselves into spaces that our businesses are having to get into so that we can really fully empathize with them, such as the remote working, virtual connectivity, and beyond. So we've actually recalibrated our focuses to center around convening community and business leaders, resources and education, promoting creative commerce and a thriving community, supporting the critical workforce needs, and understanding and advocating for critical policy decisions as they come down the pike. So as the MADE region moves from understanding and evolving into recovery, our priority is to ensure that 100% of the businesses that were viable pre-COVID-19 do not skip a beat when they are allowed to go back to business as usual. It's really important to note that because our businesses are complying with a government mandate that has stopped or modified operations at their own expense. So what's been done so far and what are we doing? Back on March 12th, we launched a COVID-19 resource page for the community and structured it in a way that all of our community partners and businesses can utilize the site. We actually were not even thinking about business closures at that point, but 3 days later, March 15th, Governor DeWine mandated the bar and restaurant closure. So we quickly developed a second resource page to inform the community of modified operations of our restaurant community. We grew that site from over 35 member locations to over 60 businesses, no matter if they were a member or not, in a matter of 2 days. And in 1 week, we had nearly 7,000 unique viewers and over 27,000 page views. And we update that site twice a day based on continued evolution of business operations because it's so fluid right now. And as the additional mandates came through after that, including the passing of the stay-at-home order, we also developed what we call a virtual bingo blackout board, which is designed to broaden that community support beyond just the restaurant community and help keep our community at large engaged. We're also strengthening our advocacy efforts at the state and federal level and fostering an environment for virtual connections through business huddles, coffee meetups, happy hours. We're marketing those everywhere. They're open to anyone, regardless of their membership within the chamber. So just wanted to make sure we highlighted that. And I think that's important because it tees us up to where we are today. So Council Member Stricula reached out to me directly on March 17th and asked how he could help us. He asked if there was still room to sit in on one of these virtual huddles for the purpose of just listening into what was going on in the business community. And I would just like to express deep gratitude for him in doing this because those calls are needed everywhere in our community right now, regardless of what your circumstance is. So I thought it was just an extreme example of leadership and we greatly appreciated that. So he hopped on with us the very next morning, heard firsthand what business owners were dealing with, how painful it was. And it was very apparent that he wanted to do something, and conversations began around what we could do to partner to support businesses as the city and the chamber. So we immediately stressed the criticalness of understanding what the city's objective would be in something like that, as well as ensuring that the business needs came forward as the council evaluated what to do. And we tried to make that very simple. We shared the following things to consider to the staff, in addition to the letter that Chairman Tom Duskalakis and I sent to the council last week, which included expediently getting funds to businesses who need them the most to alleviate pressures coming toward them at no fault of their own, aiming to create continued activity in the marketplace throughout the government-mandated closures so that business continuity measures are enabled. If we are to build a program around gift cards, as neighboring communities are doing, make sure that the program strives to ensure liability relief is built in through expiration dates. The program cannot enable extremities on businesses once things get back to the new normal. Again, if the gift card promotion becomes something that we do, consider a redemption timing tier so that businesses aren't lopsided on cash flow versus product and workforce demand. The consideration of enlisting third-party partners, such as the Mason-Deerfield Chamber Community Development Corporation to assist the city with fund grants, and the Mason-Deerfield Chamber to assist with human capital on the criteria development, selection process, implementation, sky's the limit. Thoughtful consideration being given to swift momentum opportunities, and last but certainly not least, being sure that we're focused on the specific intent of a program and that our execution enables it. So if it's immediate cash flow, resiliency for businesses, demonstration of small business support, we should really focus on that as we work together on a program together. And so we heard on Saturday from 2 members of council on some proposed solutions, which were Council Member Stricula proposed an urgent grant program in partnership with the CDC, the MADE CDC, not to be confused with the CDC, the Mason Deerfield CDC, in order to create cash flow, immediate cash flow for businesses, get these businesses back to where they could continue to maintain operations as best as possible. Mayor Grossman proposed some short-term bridge loans modeled after the SBA loan process in partnership with the city, local banks, and the MAID CDC with low interest rates. And there were some additional areas discussed where we really hope to lend some perspective and insight from Saturday's meeting as you all are evaluating what to do next. Just wanted to shed some perspective on some things. So there was mention of how we don't know emergency fund balances that businesses may already have to prepare for something like this. And I think it's important to note that no one, not any business, was prepared for the financial implications of this circumstance. But we have an opportunity to assist our businesses with creating business continuity plans and resiliency plans. So there's the silver lining of this circumstance, is that we're focused on, as we kind of go through this next phase, identifying ways to approach partnering with our businesses on those business continuity plans and resiliency plans. And we would really welcome partnerships with our public and private partners to do that. Providing resources to assist small businesses in the SBA loan process. So the Chamber is actually working on this. We ourselves are applying for the EIDL loan so that we have a true understanding of the process our businesses are enduring. We've been on the front lines on this. We've been in contact with 303 small businesses in the last 2 weeks. And I would encourage council to really think about leveraging the Chamber in something like that, because we are just as much as an expert as anyone at this point, perhaps more than most in our community, since we've already connected with so many individual businesses on that. The Paycheck Protection Program was brought up as well as providing opportunities for employers to pay employees. Yes, it's a wonderful solution that we have, but it doesn't correct the problem of no revenue coming in for many businesses. Just so you all know, there was interest in being aware of what's happening at the state level and how we can be helpful. To respond to the mention of Representative Zeltwanger's work on Saturday, I spoke with him, and he's currently spending significant time and energy in helping to develop a data-driven phased plan that's going to transition Ohioans back to work. They're really focused on the healthcare component, flattening the curve, protecting the most vulnerable, preventing hospital surges, protecting our healthcare workers and first responders right now. But they are also analyzing as many data points as possible to work towards the challenging balance of getting our businesses back open and our Ohioans back to work. All of that's extremely needed, just not an immediate solution for the circumstances that are here today. I just wanted to shed some light on that. And I also talked to Senator Steve Wilson this morning, and he advised that we continue to really focus on being a sieve of information for businesses and help them navigate the challenges ahead. And then at the federal level, I was on a call with Congressman Shabbat last week, who gave an overview of the Paycheck Protection Program, which Mayor Grossman referenced on Saturday. We distributed a recap of that meeting with the congressman on Friday afternoon to our membership. And on the proactive front, I informed him on the call of an effort that we are involved around business continuity measures at the national level to explore government funding be provided to insurance carriers for a streamlined process without adversely impacting the overall insurance safety net. So we're having discussions with at the federal level as well on how to advocate for our businesses. Discussion around loan instead of a gift being more fair and equitable. I think we've really tried to identify an opportunity to merge a solution there, which we'll get to when we talk to the CDC board. But I think we've really prioritized trying to find some creative solutions. It was brought up that we should try to identify a creative opportunity to show gratitude, hope, and impact, and have the CDC bring a solution and present the underwriting qualifications, how we would approach that. So we're excited to go through that. And we also were asked to hear from small business owners and to send out a survey from the constituents. So we did both of those things. I think many of you have been hearing from members of our community through letters. We did get a couple of videos. I don't know if there's a way for me to share those, but I have them compiled from a couple of our business owners. And then I actually did take the survey that we put together yesterday afternoon at about 3 o'clock. I put some information together on that to give you some insights. There were 15 businesses that responded to the survey in the first few hours. Since then, as of this moment, We've heard from almost 50. So there's additional data from last night, but I thought I would just shed some perspective around some of the areas that were discussed on Saturday. So let me pull up my screen here. So actually, I don't know if I have a way to share my screen. You see that?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. So here's a team of our downtown business owners, several of them I think you've heard from today, motivation for a lot of what we do. The Mason Small Business Survey we sent out, the industries represented made up retail, restaurant, brewery, salons, barbershops, health and wellness, and service, and spanned an employee base of 1 to 49 employees. So that's changed quite a bit. Like I said, this set was based off of the first 15 participants so that I could put something together for you this morning, and we have a lot more data now. Out of those 15 companies, the total annual payroll, what the average for them was $225,825, and the total annual payroll tax for those companies being $2,529. Average tenure of the businesses that were in the survey was 19.5 years. So broad span of businesses between 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and over 10 years.
Sherry, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. How many businesses did that represent?
This right here is 15, but we have almost 50 now that I can get you some additional information on.
So you're going to extrapolate out these same numbers with the
Yes.
50. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
This was just to give you guys some food for thought today.
All right.
The kind of piggybacking again on the average tenure of the businesses, there were we asked a question around how the businesses had to modify operations. 80% of them temporarily closed and 20% of them modified operations. So I think the high point of that data is 80% of them have no revenue or hardly any revenue. The modified operations piece is things like, you know, a retail shop attempting to sell gift cards to the public and things like that. We did ask a question around the impact, trying to get them to forecast the impact of the governor's mandate if it were to come into place for an additional 30 days. And this was before the president's insights yesterday into that we should continue to stay in place until April 30th. But we asked them how much projected revenue loss they expect to have over the next 30 days. And there's some data there on that as well. But the sentiment here, right, is 100% of our businesses are experiencing a revenue loss. And then you also had asked us to figure out if people would like financial help or resource help. And what we are finding out, I actually did pull this out of the most recent data right before the call because I wanted something to be as real time as possible. So what we did find out is that 63% out of almost the 50 businesses said they would need financial and resource help. 24% specifically just said financial help. So let's see if I can stop my share there. I just thought that might shed some perspective into some things that we are looking at. You know, the chamber is taking a position that council should approach this from a high level data informed decision on the measurable impact that these businesses have made to our community during their lifetime, so that we can help remove the mindset of handouts, assist in swift decision making, so that we can bring hope and gratitude to these people. We have to accept the circumstances that we are in. We do not have time to approach this the way that we normally would. Mason is incredibly thoughtful and mindful and diligent, and it's just a different circumstance. So, you know, with all due respect, with every minute city council debates the value of small business continuity, it's another minute we become less attractive as a place for current and future businesses to want to be in Mason, which is concerning for us as the chamber. So I'm going to stop talking. With that, I just want to thank you all for your consideration on this extremely important matter. I want to thank Councilmember Stricula for the opportunity to respond to his proposal, Mayor Grossman for arranging these meetings. I know this is incredibly different for the city to operate in this manner. And so just for all of you to be really thinking this through and giving this the time that you have. I know that many of the council has reached out to me over the weekend, and I know many of you have been reaching out to the businesses, and I just want to commend you for that, because it's incredible what you hear firsthand, what people are dealing with. And again, it goes back to, this is no fault of these businesses, and we really need to just do all that we can to support them. So I'm going to actually hand it over to John Kramer, who is the chairman of the MAID CDC board, so that he can discuss the CDC's proposal. And then if you guys have questions, maybe we can go there, so that way we're not intersecting the flow of this. So thank you all for everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sherry. John?
Thank you, Mayor Grossman. Can you all hear me okay? Good. I had a few difficulties getting in initially, so I figured it out. Thank you. Well, again, on behalf of the CDC, I want to thank the mayor as well as council for considering us in this discussion overall. It's a pretty important time, but we appreciate affording us this opportunity to meet with all of you. Some I've met already over the last couple of years since we've established CDC. Some of you I'm meeting for the first time virtually, so hello to everybody. But since we haven't really had an opportunity to meet with everybody that's currently in council, I thought it would be of value to do just a brief history and a brief explanation of what exactly is the Community Development Corporation that we're part of. By virtue of introduction, so to clarify, Sherry, yes, is the president and CEO of the MAID Chamber, and she is also the sole operating executive, if you will, for the Mason CDC. We are actually initially chartered by the Chamber as an organization. And then what really governs the group, and a lot of the activity you see here, I'd have to say 70–80% of it is Sherry, but we're then comprised of the three of us who are volunteer board members. And Randy Kubin and Scott Jones are also the rest of the executive board team, combination of treasurer, secretary, legal counsel, and everything else. So they're some of the other brains behind what we do day in and day out. But again, just to emphasize that we're a voluntary organization for the most part, and so we're pretty small. We were formed really in the summer of 2018, and really the genesis of our organization was coming out of the Market Street study that was commissioned by Deerfield Township and Mason to try and define what should the future plan of the region be, knowing that it was a very successful and thriving area, but things like resources were becoming limited. But it was really impactful to understand that in order to determine the future of the region, it was best to try and take a holistic approach to how you plan and develop what you want to be really when you grow up. And so one of the outcrops of this study was a recommendation to form a nonprofit community development corporation. And so we were then chartered by, I got to clear my screen up here. We were then chartered by the Mason Deerfield Chamber to create this organization. So and really what we are is an example of what's identified as a best practice in community development corporations. So we provide an alternative method by which the community can design, develop, implement, and manage community development projects. And since we're somewhat independent, we're not a government entity, although we are accountable to what the government requirements are, and we have to abide by the laws and regulations and to some extent enforce them. But we're also trying to take, as I said before, a holistic approach at how you develop community development strategies with a longer time frame in mind. And what we're also trying to do is develop a better methodology that will enable us to deliver and develop the whole community in a more sustainable manner. And so when you're looking at projects and initiatives, we're not just about a single project. In fact, we're somewhat project agnostic. We're not really interested in trying to figure out, and it's not in the best interest of the community to say, well, what's the next one big project to do? Because it's more about what's the master plan for the area? What does the community want? What is the engagement telling us, so that we can really formulate a plan and work with all of our stakeholders, including business owners, the community, the government, so that we can build upon over a long period of time what are the initiatives that will have, as I said, a sustaining impact. And by sustainability, I'm referring to things such as initiatives that take probably 3 key areas into consideration. And in order for them to be sustainable, they need to take into account the impact on the community, the impact it has economically, or the enterprise that it generates or supports, and then ultimately the impact on the environment. So if you do not have one of those 3 elements in consideration, you're more likely not to have an environment that is going to be sustainable over a long period of time if one or all of those factors become impacted in a negative way. So with that, if there aren't any other questions about the CDC, what we're all about, I just got a couple other things I want to talk about, and then we'll get into the proposal itself. Okay, well, I guess the next piece is really... Sure, go ahead, Ashley.
Sherry, this is for you, actually. I know we have, thank you so much for getting that. That was kind of my charge after our last meeting, that I wanted to hear from the local businesses. And thank you, within what, 48 hours, getting a survey done and getting 15, and now we have 50. Did that only include chamber members, or is there a way to engage all the businesses that would be underneath the CDC or inside of Mason?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Councilmember Chance. We actually, it does not just include chamber members currently. Most of the businesses actually in downtown Mason, the core, are actually not members of the chamber. But we have contact information for many of them. So we actually sent it out to, we were very specifically targeted with this because we were trying to make sure that we were addressing some of the businesses that Councilmember Stricula outlined in the charge around being reliant on walk-in traffic, things like that, like some of the service-based businesses, retail, restaurants. But our hope is that we can really span this and start to build a baseline, an actual database of communication for the entire business community for the region. The chamber's been obviously very membership focused. We have contact information for our members, but if we can come, this is actually a really great way for us to force ourselves to shove into a new norm of really connecting with businesses, no matter what their membership status is, because we have the vehicle of the CDC.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to be able to reach out to each and every one of them to compile just real data, right? And like I said, kudos to get, the first 15, now 50. And I think, there's a lot more that would love to respond. So thanks again for all your hard work. And John, great explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unmute. John.
Yes, Mayor Grossman.
Hi, John. Sorry, I lost your video there. Hopefully I'll get you back. Just so the public knows, as John is about to explain the proposal from the Community Development Corporation, this is the first time that council is seeing it. We got an email this afternoon. I haven't been able to read it carefully. There was some criticism I happened to notice online, and we got a few emails from members of the public to the city that were very critical of our lack of preparation and understanding about the CARES Act, about this proposal in general, and just, not understanding that we were in a work session in a dialogue to hear the idea and to start cultivating and crafting a plan. So we need to hear from our community, our chamber, our CDC, and we need to understand this. A comment was made that we were talking about it for 40 minutes and that was 40 minutes too long or something like that. I'm just paraphrasing, but we need to be responsible, careful, thoughtful decision makers. So it's okay for us to take some time. We don't need to take 6 months, but we need to take some time, some minutes, some hours, some days to really make a thoughtful and careful decision. There are a lot of questions we have, some of us, about this legislation. So I just want to I want to frame that. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say, Mr. Kramer. And I'm, again, so thankful. Sherry Taylor, thank you for the presentation you put together and the information you have. We don't have a lot of know-how, at least I don't, about exactly how many small businesses do we have in Mason. A question was asked at our last work session, what is the size of our universe? We don't know yet. We're beginning to get to know this. So while this initiative has a great heart behind it, all 7 of us need to understand it and have input as we craft this together. So I will leave it there and ask Mr. Kramer to go ahead and get started.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Grossman. Can you all see me at least?
I can see you now.
Okay, good. How lucky. So again, so hopefully that helps outline a little bit about what the CDC is all about. And I look forward to our organization continuing to work and develop these initiatives in the future. And so the reason why we're here today, as Sherry alluded to, is because really we were asked to respond to a request that we received about our interest in administering a local grant initiative. And some of the initial comments were about this is going to be a program to provide immediate and simple financial assistance to the small businesses in the area. So when we think about some of the requirements of this program, those are some of the requirements, if you will, that we tried to fulfill. So with speed and simplicity in mind, we began sitting down to draft what that might look like. So what you have now is our response in the form of really an executive overview. And I unfortunately, I don't have it on my laptop where I can put it up and show you, but you all have a copy of it. I'm going to do like President Trump. I'm going to show you the 15 guidelines video like this so you can all see it. So that's what I'm referring to. But really what we've developed is our response in the form of an overview right now that captures really all the key elements of a grant program that we would be happy and would be very excited to implement. Now in drafting this, we attended, we were all able to participate or at least observe and watch what was going on Saturday. So we took to heart a lot of the commentary and ideas and challenges that council had so thoughtfully considered through that period of time. And so what we have in front of you really is an outline or a very high level, if you will, description of what the various elements are for this program. So this is what we feel represents what I would call a balanced program that has probably the greatest unmet needs accounted for. And a lot of that is around what the small businesses are asking for. Yes, there are other initiatives that are going on that are either being sponsored by the government or the state, federal, county government and everything else. And this is something that we feel is going to be in addition to that, because we feel, and we're very passionate, as you can tell from Sherry's comments as well, we're very passionate about what the local impact can be and what local government can do to demonstrate their support around the viability of small businesses in the Mason area. So we took those elements to try and accommodate small businesses, the element of speed and ease of implementation, yet provide a level of accountability. Because we heard that in spades as well as part of the discussion that was going on Saturday. So how do we make sure there's a level of accountability and this is going to the right place? And are we getting the kind of impact that we would expect it to be? Or be able to identify what is the impact? Because as everybody's been saying, this is unprecedented. So we don't really know what is going to happen and how people are going to react to it. We just know what people are feeling and what it looks like today. So we're taking this approach also to create an opportunity to have a means by which have an opportunity for ongoing replenishment of these dollars. So once the dollars are granted or awarded based on our proposal, it then provides an opportunity to create really an infrastructure by which funds can then be replenishing what was given, and those dollars then be recovered to be used again for a similar situation, hopefully never a similar situation, but to be available so that it can be redistributed as needed. Because, you know, when you think about the dollars that we're now talking about bestowing upon the small businesses, they are dollars from the businesses and from the consumer and the community. So it's their money, so to speak. So it's something for the businesses because it's from the businesses. You know, again, if you want to go through some of the specific details, this is really something that, you know, the other thing I'll comment about is really the environment around which this is being crafted, because the businesses that exist today, yeah, and this was a comment that we got from another source that was another perspective that I hadn't necessarily thought of, but we appreciate the input and the perspective that we're getting by reaching out to a number of different sources. So this isn't just the thought of the CDC or the chamber, but we solicit that input from a lot of people. And it's to keep in mind that businesses that we have today have been formed and have been thriving really under a free market economy, right? We provide an environment through which they can do whatever they want. We provide guidelines. They determine what the needs of the community will be, and they provide the products and services based on what people look for. But now the conditions that they're in are not driven by market conditions. This is not a self-induced issue that they have. This has been kind of forced upon them, if you will, a government mandate in response to another situation. So that's why this is important, I think, for us to consider this type of an approach. We believe that it's not the only way you could do this, but it's what we believe is the most suitable to address the speed and the ease and the level of impact that it can have on the people that are going to benefit from it. So a number of people, I would say it's in the millions now. Millions of people across the country have been spending a lot of their time and effort around offering support and condolences and some inspiration to help people cope with the situation, okay? And now the governments are reaching out to try and provide some of the financial support they need. But the thing we have to remember is we're all hoping that this situation is something that is, and we expect it to be temporary, and we expect it to be something that we will recover from. Unfortunately, there are many people, I don't know the number, but there are many people who are going to be altered in their trajectory of their life, and their lives and their worlds are going to be changed permanently as a result of this, either directly or indirectly. And by virtue of this forum that we're doing right now to accommodate this meeting, I don't think there's anybody probably in the world anymore who is not being impacted by this. Even if you don't know anybody or everybody's healthy, if you go to a grocery store, you're impacted by it because you're not going to be able to get your peanut butter. You're not going to be able to get your toiletries and some of the other things that you're accustomed. So your life has been disrupted in some fashion. So we really see this as an opportunity that if we can do anything to alter the trajectory on which these people have been set on, not of their own doing, then it's something worth doing, in our opinion. So with that, I'll just, I can go through the proposal as we have it at a relatively high level, unless there's other questions or comments before I do that.
I have a question, John, and I think we should go through the proposal. How will funds be replenished? You mentioned that.
Well, one of the ideas that are in here, it's kind of a, let me use the terminology that we used in here. It's kind of a pay forward, if you will. So really, the expectation is that the organizations and the businesses who receive or who are the benefactors of the grant money, upon their recovery, if you will, we would expect them and strongly encourage them to contribute back the dollars that they had received in kind back to the CDC to then go back into a fund that would then be available. So it's not going to be a loan, so to speak. because I think as some people talked about on Saturday, there's other means by which people can get a loan, whether it's small business or otherwise. And if it was a loan program, then there's probably considerably more dollars that we could make available by virtue of other financial instruments or support of other banking organizations. So it's not a guarantee that the money will be coming back, but it is strongly expected by the people who are going to be receiving the benefit that they would then be returning it and donating or reinvesting back to the CDC in kind, the amount of which they had benefited.
Have you?
Does that make sense, Mayor Grossman?
Yes. Do you have examples of others? Whoa, sorry. Do you have examples of other communities with CDCs that have used this model, and what is the typical outcome? Are funds replenished? That was one of the reasons I thought a bridge loan might be wise, because once other funds came in, they could pay off with their SBA funds, and you could keep the fund continuing. And now we know that the SBA funds should be available by the beginning of next week.
Well, if I may, Sherry, can I defer you to that, some of the data behind that, or what other feedback you might have?
Yes, so I don't think any community, there's not, so the reality is, what best practices do we have to look at right now? I mean, I think we've been trying to design something that fits the needs of Mason. And Mason is an incredibly giving community. We've seen that these businesses, without being, not being even asked, they give to charities, they give to the community. And so providing a vehicle for them to pay it forward to future businesses or to themselves just felt like a better option than a loan program or even just a grant. It was kind of a sweet spot for us. And I think that goes back to Councilmember Chance on Saturday had said, how do we creatively find a way to approach this? And so we spent the weekend really digging into thinking about ways that we could find a middle ground between grants and loans. And so this is about Mason's resiliency. It's about positioning Mason to be able to bounce back from any circumstances that come our way in the future. And so this is a strategy that we're taking around that.
Okay, are there any other questions before John starts going through the proposal? Councilmember Chance?
Yeah, I think, I think we need to understand, again, there is no best practices. I think the last time we've dealt with something like this was 1917. So to be able to point to something that we've ever had to respond to is impossible. So I don't know why we continue to go down that path. Secondly, John, isn't it fair to say that how we're going to recoup these dollars is by keeping people employed, because that's how we get paid in the first place?
Yes,
So
I mean, I've been
go out of business, or move somewhere else, or if they don't open their doors again, what is the amount of money we're going to get from those businesses?
Well, and I think it's a rhetorical question. I appreciate it because I think it's on the mark, because the reality is if it's not timely, if it's not perhaps substantive, and if it's not easily managed or administered, then you do, when you saw Sherry's notes already, that upwards of 80% of these or 75% of these businesses have no revenue coming in or substantially reduced. So there's a viability issue. So to answer your question, Councilman Chance, I don't know what the impact's going to be, but right now I know that if we don't do something soon, we already see what the trend is and the trajectory of where these businesses are going. And those are part of the reason you see some of Sherry's statistics on the payroll is if it's on average $2,500 a year in payroll tax per business, and we've got 300 or 400 businesses that make up Mason, you can do the math. There's a substantial risk of funds. Now, I think you've all talked about that on Saturday a little bit and recognize the fact that regardless of what is done, there will be a longer term impact and recovery required, and it'll create some kind of a burden on Mason and the community because it will take time to recover. And so I think somebody mentioned on Saturday that as these employees are being let go or furloughed, there's no payroll. So there's no payroll against which to collect a tax. So the better we make it so that they can retain the employment over the long term. There might be a short-term period where you see a lot of organizations they're doing furloughs. They're not doing all-out closures, at least the larger firms are, closures and layoffs, because they still want to keep their employees on the hook, if you will. So they may go without pay, but they're still on the payroll, and in many cases, they're still being afforded benefits. But it's a cost-cutting measure. So the more we can do to maintain and allow the businesses to be able to recover and replenish that payroll when we get through this, the better. Otherwise, if they're gone, they may never come back. I think that's your point, Councilperson Chance. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a very thorough and good explanation. Thank you.
I would like to remind council that I want you to feel free to answer questions. Unfortunately, to the pain of the public, we cannot meet together as a group without doing it in this forum at this time. It has to be an open meeting. So you will have to listen to some of the pain of us asking questions, and some may seem very basic to some of you, but I would remind council not to make belittling comments if you don't like a question that someone is asking. And so John, if you could just go ahead and walk through that presentation, please.
Okay. And I apologize, I don't have this arranged. I wasn't expecting to go through the detail, but I assume everybody has a copy of the document. Okay. So I won't go through all the details, but you can see the program objective, and that's really in response to the request that we received to put together an idea of how to implement this program. And there's some references about, obviously, you need to do something, and which is better than nothing, because doing nothing is not an alternative. Even if you do something that's not a good idea, at least you're trying something, and at least people will recognize that as well. And I think this is as much about an economic impact as it is about a community and a morale impact, about what do people feel about being a business owner in Mason and living and thriving in this area. So again, the program summary, it is what we're calling it is a Mason Assist program, which is targeted to inject cash into small businesses located in Mason that have been negatively impacted by the recent and sudden economic downturn. In return, those small businesses receiving funds will be asked upon returning to or maintaining prosperity to contribute to the Mason Bounce Back Fund, a new fund that we will create to help Mason small businesses in the future upon any subsequent economic emergencies. Okay, so for Mayor Grossman, to your point, for the benefit of those who are watching on closed circuit, they don't have this document, so they wouldn't know necessarily what we're referring to. So that's really the impact of it, or the intent behind it. We talk a little bit about the structure itself. The assumption is around what we've been presented as a suggested $500,000 pool of funds that would be used and administered by the CDC. We will create a separate bank account. I mean, we have one that funds what we do today, but we would create for tracking and auditing purposes a separate account in which these dollars would be maintained and against which any checks issued would be sent out. And then we would also, I think the importance of this is similar to what Westchester Hospital goes through when they have a scholarship program that they try to administer. They're looking for us to be an independent administrator of that because they want to try and eliminate bias on behalf of the people who are evaluating applicants. Okay, so we would recommend that we would have really an anonymous independent selection committee. And we anonymous because we don't want people to know who's making the decision and evaluating the criteria, so they cannot be subjected to undue influence or attempts to influence what the outcomes are. And it's also to try and maintain as much objectivity as possible and stick to the guidelines that are put together. Not to say that they will be completely emotionless, but again, that's the intent, to try and keep the integrity of the program. But there's some requirements. We want to make sure that the people who are on the committee are not going to have a conflict of interest. So there's somebody who are not standing to be a benefactor that could potentially influence their decision. So we want to make sure that if somebody is on the selection committee, they will by default be ineligible to participate in any of the grants. Or we want to make sure that there's a disclosure if there's any other affiliations that they might have relative to somebody who may be an applicant, whether it be a relative or their neighbor or some other thing that may otherwise influence their decision. And then the other element here is around the timeliness of it. So what we want to do is, upon the promotion and the advertisement and the invitation to be sent out to the business community, we would open this up for application for about 48 hours and then close that application so that we don't drag this on. Mayor Grossman, to your point, we don't want to just keep doing this forever and ever and ever. We got to get to action on this. And then we will pull down the applications, and then this committee will convene very quickly so that within about a 24-hour period, they can evaluate all the applicants and make a judgment on who will be awarded. Now, we don't know how many people will apply. We have some data on how this was done in Hamilton, and I believe they had roughly, and Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there were somewhere around 75 organizations that submitted an application to participate in their fund program. Of the 200 or 300, you asked about the universe of our businesses. If there's a couple hundred businesses that would potentially qualify, obviously the more applicants we get, we may need to take more than 24 hours to go through that. But the intent is to get them in, get them accumulated, evaluate them quickly, focus on it so that we can turn around and start writing checks and getting the awards out to everybody. And then as far as the process goes, we'll create, obviously, we want to make this an online method by which they can apply, so it's very easily and timely. We'll structure it to assist the selection committee in making grants to the application that best meets the criteria, so that way the application will by itself, without having to have a lot of text or other storylines that have to be contributing to it. So make it about as objective as possible. And then the decision will be the sole discretion of the selection committee, okay? Both on who will be awarded and the amount of the grant. And that is something that we probably want to comment on a little bit later about, you know, depending on the magnitude of the grant pool and what should that minimum or maximum award look like. So we'd look for some counsel back from council on that. And then we'll open it up for a period of time, and we will provide standard business. The applicants will have to provide some very standard business information in order to qualify as it's outlined in the program. The next page really just talks about how we're going to promote and market this. So we're looking for support from the city. We're looking for the chamber and as well as the CDC. We're not necessarily going to create a brand new website chartered by the CDC. We're going to leverage some of the assets and the resources that we have today, which many of them are familiar with already. So people are already using these means of communication. They're familiar with them. So that'll enhance the speed at which people learn about it and can respond to it. If we get into the eligibility criteria, so any questions so far? Okay, thank you. So getting to the eligibility, again, we borrowed these from some best practices that we saw, and Councilman Stricula's legislation proposal had a lot of these elements in it as well. So we're hearing that in building our plan. The business must be located within the city limits of Mason. So we heard that loud and clear. It must have, as a question on Saturday was, what's the operational definition of a small business? it is an organization that has less than 50 employees. And some of the data that Sherry shared demonstrated that the people responding to that survey, in fact, had 1 to 49 employees. So it's already meeting the sweet spot of what is needed. And they have to be in good standings in the state of Ohio. The business must be a brick and mortar business. It can't be something like me working out of my house necessarily, but it must be open to the public or have been open to the public the week preceding the stand in place order, and that they were maintaining regular hours. So it's really to help them understand you were in good standing before this, but now it's had an impact on you. So we have to recognize that we may be getting applicants that have maybe been in some order of distress that preceded this event. And we'd have to really make sure that we understand the nature and the relevance of their condition to this situation. The preference will be given to for-profit consumer-based businesses such as those that rely on walk-in customer activity, like a restaurant, salons, barbershops, retail shops, breweries, and bars. Preference will also be given to locally owned businesses. So you may have, there might be a little bit different consideration for franchise-owned businesses that are owned or controlled by an enterprise or a holding company outside of the Mason area. So those, we recognize that they're going to be impacted, so we have to weigh the local impact versus those that are not locally owned. But if you're going to apply, you need to be the actual owner of the business. Good standing with the city of Mason. You can't necessarily be in arrears for us or liens against you, or you're delinquent in your taxes or whatever it might be from previous years. It will aver that awarded funds will be used primarily for maintaining operations or reopening of the business. So we broadened it a little bit. There's a lot of references about just so it supports payroll, but there's other factors that can inhibit a business's ability to operate beyond the people that are there, whether it be inventory issues or working capital or whatever it might be. Let's see. The business will aver that it is currently active, lawful, and has all necessary and required licenses and registrations to operate. The business cannot be a direct sales company. It will aver to report monthly. So once they're awarded this, they must report back to us monthly how the grant has helped the business and to what purposes the funds were applied. So again, that element of accountability, because as we administer this for the first time, probably in history, it's good to kind of get a baseline. Well, what was the outcome of this? So then in the event that we do this again, we can learn from it and make modifications as needed. And we can understand if we did it this way with this much money, what kind of an impact does it have? So if we extrapolate it out, if we did it again with this level of funding, higher or lower, then what can we expect from the outcome to be? The business will aver that it should return to or maintain prosperity. It will use its best efforts. So again, getting back to the returning the favor, so to speak, to contribute to the Mason Bounce Back Fund in an amount equal to the grant it received. The Mason Bounce Back Fund will be created and administered by the MAID CDC to assist Mason businesses in future economic emergencies. So if in the future another situation occurs, there can be additional funds that the city may choose to administer out to help, and that will then potentially augment and supplement whatever funds we're able to accumulate as part of the bounce back funds. So those are some of the high level criteria that we have. And then if we want, we can go into some of the accountability. Any questions so far? Mayor Grossman.
Hi, thanks. Yes, I do have a question. You talked about businesses will state that awarded funds would be used primarily for maintaining operations or reopening business. So in catching up a little bit with the SBA assistance, I spoke to a representative from Congressman Shabbat's office today, and I asked the question about if public funds are used, does that interfere with the eligibility to apply for SBA assistance? And the answer wasn't real clear. He's going to get back to me on that, but there was an issue with duplicating the same type of service with public funds, and I'm not communicating that as well as I'd like to be right now, but you can't duplicate, there's a limit to what you can do to duplicate what the SBA funds are doing from the federal level. Do you know what I'm talking about there? And can you comment on that? Or have you guys researched that? Is there going to be an issue with people receiving? I know it goes through this nonprofit, but is it kind of like, I don't know, is it going to interfere with the SBA assistance process?
Well, Mayor Grossman, I can't speak intelligently about the whole SBA process. I'm not sure if Sherry or Randy or Scott have some feedback on that. But what I can say is there is a certain element of separation that is then afforded by administering this through the nonprofit organization. So be it, if you will, the City of Mason bestows upon the CDC a grant upon which we would then administer a grant from the CDC. So that's one way to look at it. But Randy, were you going to comment on it as well? Was that who's going to talk?
If I could. Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty familiar with the CARES Act and in particular the Paycheck Protection program that I think you're referring to. And the other aspect of that is a more emergency or disaster loan program through the SBA. As far as the Paycheck Protection program is concerned, there's nothing I'm aware of in that program that would where this type of a benefit would conflict with that. Potentially there would be something with the disaster program, but with the way this is designed, where it is, excuse me, where it's a grant program through a not-for-profit, which would be the CDC. It's not a direct government assistance program, so I don't see that there would be any conflict and any offset or anything like that.
So it gets washed through that entity?
Correct. So it's a grant. Once it leaves the government structure as a grant to a not-for-profit, it loses at that point. It would lose any government attachment.
Okay. Do you anticipate your applicants also applying for SBA loans through the federal government in the coming days?
I would be surprised if they weren't. I mean, it's a very attractive and accessible program from what I understand. So I would think that they would be looking to that as well. And I would view this as a supplement to that, and the funding that they're going to get through the Paycheck Protection program in particular is in a direct relationship to their payroll costs. So it's a direct offset. It's a loan initially and then forgivable based on their payroll cost expenditures over the next 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Scott, I see you're unmuted, but I don't see your face. I lost your video. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, not to what Randy had to say. I guess my thought from a practical level is, if they're getting an injection of cash, they would probably be a more viable candidate for any type of loan. But I'm not aware of anything under the CARES Act that would preclude someone from applying for a loan by virtue of the CARES Act if they've received some type of grant or other type of non-governmental cash injection.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. You articulated that much better than I did. Sorry, that was hard to get out. All right, we've got that cleared up. So John, we have a question from Councilmember Nelson. Go ahead. You'll need to unmute. Oh, she's trying. Can the host unmute her?
Diana, if you press up at the top, there should be a mute button.
There she is.
Sorry about that. It wasn't unmuting. So I have a concern as to how we're going to choose the individuals, the small businesses that are going to receive these grants. I want to make sure that the program that we have in place is so clear cut that if one person comes in and makes that decision, somebody else who would come in would be able to make the same decision with the funding. This just kind of takes away any ability for an individual or just to randomly choose a business or a number. I want something more structured. So that's one of my concerns on this. I also feel like it would be really important that once these grants were given out, that all the detailed information as to who applied and the information that they submitted, as well as the information that they received, be turned over to the city to review. I think it's our job as city officials to make sure that that money goes to the small businesses, which is what it's designed to do, in the appropriate way. And again, to make sure that all businesses are included in this, not just chamber, which I know you've said before, but I want to make that clear. It's not just for chamber members. So I think it would be really important to take it a step further, and once the money is distributed, or once the program is over, to hand over all that documentation to the city for review.
Sure. And thank you. Very good comment and question. So there is a level that we cover that a little bit on the accountability side. So if you jump to that, we're going to provide reports back to the city of Mason that shows really all the activity that was done to promote it, all the emails that were sent, all the people who replied to it. We'll tell you all the businesses who are applying for the grant, everybody who was accepted. You'll have the information as to what they submitted as part of the application. And Councilmember Nelson, I heard you say that kind of loud and clear from an accountability standpoint. And the intent here is, I agree, you know, the businesses that I've run historically, we work with what's called, and Sherry's going to probably laugh because I use this reference a lot, is something has to be repeatable and reproducible. So it's repeatable when somebody, if I were to give you the instructions of how to make the decision, you could make the same decision every time. So that means it's repeatable. If it's reproducible, that means I could now hand it to Mayor Grossman, and she would be able to make the same decision as you would have. So we do have to make these criteria relatively simple. And that's why I was commenting before, was we can't rely on a lot of poor me kind of text stories about here's why I'm more deserving. And, you know, I lost my leg in a war, or what, you know, however tragic that might be. But we've got to stick to really the criteria so that everybody knows what's required, and nobody should be surprised whether or not they were awarded or not. What I'd like to think will be the case is we had more people eligible than we had dollars to distribute.
And I think that will be. Last I checked, we have, I believe, 1,200 businesses who meet this criteria within the city limits. So it's going to be difficult, and I want to make sure that, you know, we give as much as we can to those individual small businesses.
Sure.
So I have one more question. Promoting this, I feel like it's going to be extremely important for us to make sure that all the businesses get this information, that this is available. Because, I mean, even with all the SBA loans and everything out there, I spoke to actually a number of business owners today, and I was shocked and saddened to see how many people really don't understand what's out there and what's available to them from the federal level. And there's so much going on. There's so much information being given that it is difficult for these individuals to process through all of this. And so I want to make sure that all of the businesses the small businesses within Mason who qualify are notified of this, and, you know, let them know that you're there to assist them and help them if they have any questions, comments, or, you know, have trouble processing for the loan application.
Understood. Very good point.
Are there
Yes,
any
because
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead and finish.
No, I was just going to acknowledge the point is yes, not every business is a member of the chamber. So if we only utilize member means of communication, then that will limit the population or limit the universe. That's why we're going to use, as we indicated in the promotion, we'll promote through multiple means to reach out using the many different forums that all businesses would be able to encounter one way or the other.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember
Thank you for the question.
Bradford, I see your hand is up.
Okay, thank you very much. I did sent to Eric, and I think Eric sent out to all the members. I don't know if he had a chance to read it. Take a minute, I would like to read it to you. And here's what I've been informed are the key features of the Paycheck Protection Program. And I think Mr. Kubin's comments that, yeah, he does expect most businesses to apply for the SBA. And it says, you apply for a loan through an SBA approved lender. Here in the SBA link to Cincinnati area approved lenders. Cincinnati area is a short list: U.S. Bank, Fifth Third Bank, Huntington Bank, and People's Bank of Marietta. The loan is an amount that is 2.5 times your monthly business payroll, being the monthly average over the 12 months prior to the date the loan is made. Maximum loan, $10 million, no fees associated with it, requires no personal guarantee, requires no collateral, does not require proof that funds can not be received elsewhere, has a simplified application process. The loan will be funded quickly to avoid the economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis. Most importantly, borrowers are eligible for a loan forgiveness equivalent to the sum spent on covered expenses during the 8-week period after the loan is originated. Covered expenses include wages, benefits, rent, mortgage interest payments, and utility charges. The loan is forgiven if you maintain your pre-crisis level of full-time equivalent employees for 8 weeks after the loan is made. If you fall below the level of employment, your loan forgiveness is reduced in proportion to a reduction in headcount. The same applies to salary reductions. If you've already made staffing reductions, you qualify for loan forgiveness if you rehire back to the pre-crisis level by June 30th of 2020. You do not need to demonstrate actual economic harm in order to qualify. Rather, you simply need to make a series of good faith certifications, primarily that current economic conditions necessitate the loan to support ongoing business operations, and that the funds will be used to maintain payroll and address and other covered expenses. I guess my question is, that seems to be much more comprehensive of taking care of small business than what we as the city have the resources to go ahead and supply. So if you should have got it from Mr. Hanson, at least the council members, a copy of that statement in regards to Paycheck Protection Program. And to me, this seems to be a little duplication. And my understanding is the money's going out Friday if they apply. Am I missing something? Thank you.
So I guess you had was that more of a commentary than a question? But I guess at the end you said, are you missing something? That's the only question I really heard out of that. But I guess I think as was mentioned on Saturday, Councilmember Nelson actually talked about how there's an opportunity that before we start embarking on what Mason would do to put money out there and everything else, what are all the other programs that are available to people? And is it, before we start doing something like this, do we see what we can do to help connect people with what they need and what's available to them? And that's something that a community could choose to do. A local government could say, we're going to provide you a resource that will help you navigate through all the state, federal, local dollars that are already available to you before they do something else. So as we said, this is a supplement on top of it. And really, to me, it's about, there's things that the state can do, there's things the county, the federal are going to do. But the question and the opportunity here, I think, is about what Mason is in a position to show and do for the small businesses. I mean, I'll be frank. I think I've heard from the 2 years that I've been involved with the CDC that there is a desire for the city of Mason to be recognized more as a small business friendly government. And it is not necessarily perceived as that today. So there's other things that people can do to bail themselves out or find other sources for aid or support. But I guess to try and drive that spirit of support and thank you back to these businesses, these 1,500 businesses that have been paying their payroll taxes and helping to grow this community. Now they're in a time of trouble. Is Mason of the mind that they want to do something to demonstrate their appreciation and help throw a lifeline to them? Not that they're the only answer, because quite honestly, what the business community needs is going to be considerably more than what Mason could probably afford to do.
I agree with that. I agree with your comment. That's more than what we can do. And I think that for the city to partner with the CDC to be a conduit to help the businesses apply for these SBA loans would be a great benefit to the businesses. Thank you.
And thank you. And I appreciate the thought on that. What I will say is, if that's what you're looking to administer, there's probably better avenues to do that. We are best positioned to administer a grant type program. We are not necessarily the best avenue by which we would provide, if you will, administrative and brokerage activities to facilitate loan applications and what we need to do that piece of it. But again, we were asked to respond to a grant opportunity. And so we're building our proposal and our commentary around that approach, trying to keep into account some of the factors that have been identified, the speed of it, the ease of it, and the level of accountability, and also be able to track what the impact has been and people making sure that everybody knows how your dollars were spent. And the CDC affords that separation, if you will, between the city and the community from an administration standpoint. And Mayor Grossman, I'd have to say I wouldn't necessarily use the word it washes through us. That's not necessarily the reference I like, but I understand that, yes, it would be a pass through, if you will, as far as how the dollars are administered. So I don't know if there's anything more that any of the other CDC board members could comment, or anybody else from council.
Councilmember Chance.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And Councilmember Bradburn, thank you for bringing that up. And I think that's everybody's intentions, is try to, attach themselves anywhere they can in regards to help, the crisis they're in right now. I had a long conversation with Scott Schmidt today with Clybourne's. It was very eye-opening. He followed it up with an email, very profound, very heartfelt. And to your point, Councilman Bradburn, I was going to read you the whole email, but I don't really like being read to. So what I'm going to do is I will send it out, and I'll send it to Mr. Hanson, and then you can divvy it out. But here's three of his points to kind of speak a little more true to reality, opposed to, I love that, people are saying, hey, you can go do this, hey, you can go do that. Well, first of all, the banks are closed, so you're going to apply through the drive-through. Secondly, well, let me read these points real quick. He said, when we furloughed our employees, we were told that the unemployment system would be responsive and waive the mandatory waits for payment and would take care of getting our people paid. To date, I got this email this morning. To date, less than 10% of our staff has been approved for payment. He has 200 people on staff, by the way. 10% of our staff has been approved for payment, has received anything from the state. The ODJFS site crashes daily, and there are 3+ hour waits to try and get in contact with someone via phone. So this is real life. This is someone that's trying to do this. And this is one of probably 50 feedbacks that I've heard that is very consistent. The government approved a $2.3 trillion stimulus package that currently has shut down the SBA website and crashed all other support system. Who knows how long it'll take for the stimulus package and the options provided to become funds in people's accounts. So here's a real life example, right? I'm not, and here's the other thing that struck me, and John, thank you for bringing up the notion that we want to be recognized in City of Mason as small business friendly, right? Here's what he wrote in another one of his bullet points, which was very disheartening to me. All municipalities, he has 4 different restaurants. All municipalities, Blue Ash, Hamilton, Montgomery, have personally reached out to me multiple times, and we have received relief from both Hamilton and Blue Ash. Mason is the only municipality I've received no contact from. All municipality representatives showed genuine concern and interest in doing everything and anything they could to help us get through this nightmare of a circumstance. So as we sit here and, we understand that the government's going to put out a lot of these high hopes and say, hey, go attach yourself here. Here's what you can do. And the bottom line is the demand is going to be, we all know, I mean, I'm in government. We're not made to be efficient. And it is going to be nearly impossible for these businesses to apply for this, get it done quickly. Guess what? Today is another day they're not generating revenue. Tomorrow is going to be another day they don't generate revenue. And guess what? Now we're through April 30th. So here we are starting a full month, 0 revenue. And our best answer to them is, hey, go talk to the feds. Go talk to them and get in line with the other million people that are going to be trying to apply at the exact same time. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough process. And like I said, I appreciate what they're doing. I appreciate what the SBA is doing. I appreciate what the stimulus package is doing. And I hope and pray that some of our local businesses can get some relief from that. But that's not something I want to rely on. That's for certain, because I haven't heard too much success out of it. And I haven't heard anyone suggesting it like we are. And I don't know why we are, but that's, to me, we can do better. And as leaders, we shouldn't wait for someone else. Let's lead. Let's extend, and let's help them out, right? It's not time to sit here and analysis paralysis. I mentioned that again on Saturday. We can sit here and try to, figure this out. The CDC, man, that thing I just read, I think it was very thoughtful. I thought it was thorough, and I think it checks all my boxes that I need to know in regards to what Councilmember Strickland talked about in regards to accountability criteria and all that stuff. So thanks to John, Scott, and your team and Randy for putting that together with the help of the chamber and Sherry. I thought that was, given the time, given, how expedited we had to get this thing done, I thought you guys did a nice job of at least getting something to start with. I mean, is there a few tweaks? Yes, but I think we can get started with that now. So again, thank you. And I just wanted to, and I will send on this email because it was pretty impactful and pretty powerful. So thank you.
Councilmember Chance, I'm just going to make another reminder. We do need to be thoughtful about this. Analysis paralysis assumes that we're not supposed to do our job and think carefully about this. So I'd appreciate comments like that not to occur anymore in this dialogue. You may not know this.
That's my belief.
Actually, Scott Schmidt may not know this. I actually was in contact with his wife and heard a lot about their story, and she passed along the program that Hamilton initiated, and I passed that along to our city manager, and we got to work on it right away. And so we're working on a gift card system, and we're trying to respond as best we can. But if council could also refrain from comments that, for lack of a better description, throw staff or the rest of council under the bus for not moving fast enough. We have had our entire operational system flipped upside down. We're working in incident command. There are a lot of changes that have gone on in this building, in this city, and all of our departments, and everyone is trying to adjust. So we are moving as quickly as we can, and absolutely, as soon as Councilmember Stricula requested this, I got to work right away, and we waited for clearance to call meetings, and we talked about what we wanted to do next on Saturday, and we called a meeting, and we got, thankfully, our members from the CDC and chamber friends here to discuss this with us. Okay, I saw Councilmember Nelson's hand up.
I think that obviously Mason's grant isn't going to be the save all for these small businesses. We don't have the funds to give that much money to really bail these businesses out. I think we have to be careful about bashing the federal assistance, just because it is a really good program that they're putting into place for everyone. They've now brought banks into it so that the funding is distributed quicker to everyone. They are moving. I know the SBA site was crashing. They have made some changes to it, and now instead of filing it online, you download it. So businesses are still going to have to get other sources of funding, because what we're going to be able to give them isn't going to really be enough to bring them out of this. They're still going to need funding. So I don't want to discourage our small businesses from trying to pursue this and look into it, because it isn't that difficult. And I do know, I mean, yes, the unemployment has, have seen some struggles with the 3 RO8s. I've heard about that, but they are really trying as hard as they can to move this money out to one. And I don't want to discourage small businesses from doing that, because they're still going to need to do it. I am very much for helping give a grant and help these small businesses. We as a city, we're always doing things for larger businesses, and we do a lot of economic development planning. We have a great economic development department who brings these big companies into Mason, which keeps our tax rates down. And we do a lot of incentives and different programs to bring them here and to keep them here. And we don't really do a lot for our small businesses. And so this is a great opportunity for us to invest back into our small businesses and to show them that we care. And I think it's been great to see some of our social media that's been going on, individuals trying to, get people together to purchase gift cards and to get takeout. I really see our community coming together, and I just love that. And if we can be part of the solution, I would like to be part of the solution. One question, I did think a lot about the gift cards, because I think gift cards are great, and redistributing maybe the gift cards back to individual taxpayers so that you're benefiting both the business and the individual taxpayer who's paid. But one thing that I thought about that is, what about some of the companies where you really don't get a gift card for? We have some out there, and it would be great for restaurants, but for some other businesses, it's not gonna really, a gift card I don't think is gonna benefit them. And so to make it fair, I think it would be better just to give them cash versus do the gift card program. But that's just one of the things, that I was concerned about, is how do you distribute those gift cards evenly from those businesses to give them revenue?
Yeah. To Councilmember Nelson's point, thank you for sharing that. It's real important that everything we share as public officials is as accurate as it possibly can be. And if it's an opinion, we make that really clear. We don't want to discourage people from applying for federal assistance. I know that even in this past week, there were public officials making assumptions on social media that we would not be eligible for federal assistance in Warren County because Warren County hadn't declared a separate emergency. And we've been able to clarify that and correct some things piece by piece, but we want to be really careful. We do encourage you to apply for that federal assistance. Another point Councilmember Nelson brought up earlier was we have 1,200 or so businesses that qualify under this written plan. So, I mean, did you guys have a target of how many businesses you actually wanted to consider? That's a question, I think, for John Kramer.
Hey, John, didn't you mention that there was only 300 that fit our criteria?
No, that wouldn't. I was just throwing out a theoretical number, a hypothetical number, that if you had only 300, what would that population look like?
Is it truly 1,200, Eric?
I don't know. I don't have a census I don't have a complete business census, much less one of 50 employees or less. So that seems high to me, but I don't have a data set.
I'd find it hard to believe that there's 1,200.
what is your target? Do you want to try to focus on 100, on 50? I'm just curious if you guys had discussed that as a CDC board.
Well, one of the things, Mayor Grossman, that we did talk about that is a question that we would have for council is around if you chose to go through this program or take this approach to provide aid, you know, there's obviously, if you do the math and if you got, let's say it is 300, or let's just say for round numbers, it's 100 companies that are eligible. And if there's $500,000 of total funds available, that kind of gives you an idea what the average award could look like, right? But one of the things that we'd want to look at is we want to make sure that there isn't, we'd like to make sure that we would somehow communicate an expectation around thresholds. So what's the targeted maximum amount that a business could apply for, or that we'd be willing to award? But you also want to make sure that it's some kind of a minimum, so it's even worth their effort, that it's going to have an impact, that it's not $11.67. So there's other numbers, but again, based on the total available pool, you by definition are going to limit the number of people if you want to make anything even appear to be substantive. So if you're talking about $500,000, which is generous, and it's not easily found money, then you might be looking at anywhere from, depending on the grant amount, it might be 75 to 150 companies that over that time frame may be able to participate.
Yeah. Okay, I think this might lead us to some more questions that came up on Saturday at our previous discussion, and the criteria for choosing those companies. I saw a hand from Sherry Taylor. Would you like to take the floor for just a minute, and we'll get back to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Grossman. I just wanted to shed some perspective on the numbers. So there's, from the data set that we have as far as a business demographic for Mason, is there's around 1,200 total businesses in the city of Mason. So that factors in every business that we have. On the under 50 employees, there's around 800, but that is not, it's not fair to say that those 800 are all qualifying companies because of the standard that we're looking to set around things like brick and mortar, you know, more reliant on walk-in traffic, things like that. Locally owned businesses, that's one of the criteria, is that a locally owned business would have preference. So as we narrow this, that number gets smaller and smaller. I just don't think it's fair for us to try to assume right now what we might get in a set of applicants. So I just wanted to clear the air that on some data, because there were a lot of numbers thrown around, but that's the information that I have, and that's from Sites USA.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We were trying to figure out on Saturday, how big is the universe? Councilmember Bradburn?
That was why I raised my hand, because that was going to bring up, I think the big thing here is how big is the universe, because then you're going to have to decide how big is the dollar amount. And to go ahead and say, okay, it's going to be $500,000. If this universe is much bigger, then all of a sudden you say, well, we ran out of money, you don't get any. Oh, well, we got to go back for the city for another $500,000, $1.5 million. There is a financial end to it. We're not the federal government. We don't print money.
Yeah, and that went back to some questions we had about also trying to figure out what the impact is going to be to us as an entity. We have a fiduciary obligation to the public to be very careful with public funds. We also have a legal obligation to balance our budget, and we haven't had an opportunity to go look through that with staff and to study whether or not we might need to restructure some things in 2020. We don't know what the revenue impact will be, the loss of revenue impact in 2020 and 2021 as we recover from this crisis. And so there were a lot of unknowns as we tried to discover the size of the universe. And now we're learning the CDC's concept for how funds might be replenished. There was talk of the city replenishing the funds. That hasn't been decided yet. So there are a lot of unknowns as we're trying to digest this. And then there were lots of questions about criteria and equal protection. How do we justify a grant system when we can't give money to everyone in the city of Mason that is hurting. Is there someone who might want to comment? I see Councilmember Chance.
Yeah, first of all, I want to talk about where these funds could come from. Being on the finance committee for the past 4 years or prior, I was on the committee prior to. In January, I know we had a mild winter, correct? And I know every single year we budget for salt, and that's what, $250,000, $300,000. Have we used that money, Eric? I know there's funds, and Councilman Strickler, you brought it up last time, the Economic Development Fund. Is that right?
It's the Economic Sustainability Fund.
Okay.
I think somewhere around 1.5 million, something like that.
So that there's 1.5 million in that fund. And Eric, so I'll just save a few more questions here real quick. So I would like to address, the mild winter to see if there's opportunity there, if there's funds that are sitting there, and those aren't our dollars, right? So if we are allotted for those but didn't use it, then we should be prudent with those. Secondly, I know there's a local government fund that we don't even bake into our budget because it's a moving number. We don't know what that is. It comes from the state, and maybe Councilmember Nelson, you can remember or recall that number, but we don't even consider that. And we get, I think it's like, if I can recall, it's $500,000 or $600,000 a year that we don't bake into our budget because it's a moving target. So there's funds there. And a lot of these funds have been earmarked for economic disruption. And I would challenge anyone to tell me when there's been a bigger economic disruption than there is right now we're dealing with. So Eric, if you could you kind of shed some light on, I guess, 3 of those funds, the local economic fund, maybe the fund for the salt, and then possibly the economic sustainability fund?
Yeah, I do have a couple of numbers. It's kind of interesting. You're talking about there's 3 different items here. One is a budgeted anticipated expense. It's for snow removal. One is a revenue source, local government fund revenues. And the other is, for lack of a better word, a set aside, so kind of cash in the bank. We typically budget around $500,000 for snow and ice removal. And this year was a mild year. And keep in mind there may be storms yet to come at the end of this year that we may need to dip into in another budget cycle. But I would estimate once we fill the salt barn, we probably saved $300,000 in this year that we won't need to expense for snow and ice removal. So that's anticipated expense that we likely won't realize. The local government fund is a revenue to the city that we do not budget for. So as we look at the next year's operating budget, we kind of pretend like there won't be any local government revenues because that has been declining for several years, and it is an unpredictable source. And that has ranged in the last 4 years. And it's also dependent on state tax revenues. So there's some other unpredictability there. But in the last 4 years, it's been about $500,000. And the last 2 years creeping up, we were anticipating $650,000 this year, but we did not budget for it. What that means is if those revenues come in at that level, it doesn't impact this year's operating budget. We're still able to live within our means this year without the $650,000. And we've always talked about, one of the virtues of our budget, our conservative budgeting process. In effect, at the end of the day, those unanticipated revenues and those over anticipated expenses is what allows us to move funds into our capital fund. And so we have extremely healthy and aggressive capital budget because of that. And then,
and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Councilmember Nelson, I asked you if you could come up with it, but the last 3 or 4 years, I know it's been 10, 12, $14 million a year that we have transferred over to that capital budget. And I view small businesses as capital inside Mason, so that could be utilized too.
That's true. Each year we transfer, it's varied, I would say between 8 and 12 million on the high end. We've been able to move over into the to the capital fund. Keep in mind, though, that's kind of double counting. That 12 million is composed of those 300,000s and those local government funds and those extras that we're able to move at the end.
That's
The
fair.
other one you asked about was the Economic Sustainability Fund. That is another outgrowth of our attempt to both be conservative budgeting as well as plan for future cycles. The paving program, vehicles was our first effort. The economic sustainability was our newest effort, and I think we all wished we'd had. It's a great idea, and it was built for times like this. It's just we've only been at it a couple of years. But I did surprise myself looking at, we do have $3 million that over the last 3 years, we've been able to put into that economic sustainability fund. So there is a balance there in that fund.
And that economic sustainability fund, as you mentioned, it was the motive or the directive of that is during economic disruption, correct? Or do you have a explanation or for what that was set up for? Because I think it's precisely this.
Well,
What's the trigger point, I think, is his question. What would be the event or the situation that would trigger the deployment or dipping into it, if there were any?
there is none. There's none defined.
Okay.
The virtue of it was, and this was given some of the then current business expansion, we realized we didn't want to be too reliant on any one revenue source. And we also wanted to continue a conservative budget. And so we set aside funds in what we called the Economic Sustainability Fund. To your question, no, I don't think anyone here thought, yeah, for the next global pandemic, that's when we'll deploy those funds. That wasn't in our minds. But there are a host of things that could have been an economic downturn. It could have been, a corporation that was transitioning out of the city. There could have been all kinds of shocks to our operating budget where we could have relied on that. Keep in mind, and at our last regular council meeting before some of this disruption, we spent some time talking about our Moody's rating that we're very protective of. And part of what undergirds, among several things, our Moody's rating is healthy balances. And so things like the Economic Sustainability Fund, those set-asides, our capital transfers, all of those things and more is what helps us to be prepared for these type of times, and Moody's is recognizing that.
All right, Councilmember Bradburn.
Yeah, but as I understand the Economic Stability Fund, that's basically also to go ahead and buffer us for what we're going to have as an economic downturn from all the businesses in Mason because of this pandemic. So we can go ahead and have the ability to use that so we don't have to go ahead and basically downgrade city services and lay off our employees.
Can I speak on that?
Am I wrong on that, Eric?
Can I speak on that real quick? I have some insight on that. So I spoke with our finance director because we had talked about last time. First of all, I want to apologize because I did read in one of the emails, one of our small business owners said, it was like you guys weren't even prepared for your meeting on Saturday. And I just want to say I was not given the information of what we were going to talk about. So I had no clue. I thought we were talking about city staffing. So therefore I didn't have the numbers. And when we started talking about grants, first it came to my mind, well, our revenues are going to go down. We need to make sure that we have city services available, essential services, police, fire, sanitation available for our residents when our numbers go down. And that was a huge concern of mine. I mean, that's our job as elected officials to make sure that our city is at good standing. And I don't want to ever have to raise our income taxes. And so once I sat down with our finance director and talked about some of these numbers, we are projecting a 20% drop in our revenues. And we're basing that off of the Great Recession from 2008, 2009. So yes, our revenues are going to go down, but we are still actually, even with the revenues going down, we're still going to be positive with some extra funds left over. So once I, came to that conclusion and looked at the numbers and became pretty confident that our city can provide for this grant for our small businesses, the money is there and it's not going to hurt us. Then I became comfortable with the grant and I'm for it. So I just want everyone to be rest assured that I really do not, as a CPA and as the chair of the finance committee in the past, I really do not think that our city, of course, our revenues are going to go down. We're not going to put as much money into the capital account, but we're going to be able to survive. We're going to, not have to cut services or staffing or raise taxes. And, like Ashley had said earlier, if these businesses, if these small businesses go out of business, we're not going to be collecting the revenue from them. And so in a way, by us supporting them and keeping them viable, we're going to be recouping our money in the future. And Ashley, just on your note there, pretty good thinking on the 300,000 for the salt, right? I really like that. That's good. I like how you pulled that money from there.
And I think that, if you don't mind, Mayor, am I good to go? Okay. And I think, that was just from me walking outside yesterday thinking, wow, we haven't, we've had a pretty mild winter, and I'm always surprised by the amount of how much salt costs. And I know we've passed and, or we have looked at the numbers in the past, and they're $450,000 to $500,000 every year. And I just thought to myself, there's no way that we've utilized all of those that we budgeted for. And so that just brings me to the question, are there other line items, right? Are there other things? I know we've done that plenty of times to where we have looked at things that we're going to put in the budget that are earmarked, but they aren't spent, right? That is kind of a wish list, is how we go through it on the budgetary process. And are there others? And because, if I can come up with a $300,000 coffer that we're just sitting there, it's not our job to be a savings account for our taxpayers, that's for sure. And if that $300,000 was going to be spent to keep our roads salted, I certainly think that $300,000 could be spent on keeping our businesses open. And Eric, so if you have any others, feel free to share if you can come to your mind.
I think I'd leave it to say there's lots of items like snow removal that you could look at. There's expenses that we hope not to incur and have a good track of that. There likely will be some expenses with this incident that we're going to incur that weren't expected. I think my message both to the public as well as to council is, for several years, council has been very methodical and careful and conservative in how we've handled both expenses and revenues and set-asides. And we're financially prepared for situations like this. Not that we want to go through them, not that that there aren't other uses for those funds, but I think the public, and to Councilmember Nelson's point, we're not in dire straits. We have prepared carefully for many years. The Economic Sustainability Fund is maybe more symbolic of that type of preparation. I don't think council needs to be overly concerned with us being unprepared for this. I say that there's a lot of uncertainty with all of this, but I'm very confident in how well we've done things for many years, both on the operating side, but also on the fundamental financials, that we're prepared to maintain services when we're allowed to come out and do our work.
Okay, Councilmember Honderlaw.
Hi, I unmuted. First comment is somebody, I think it's Scott Jones, is not muted, because every time there's some background noise or clearing of the throat, my screen goes black to him. So I don't know if it's voice activated on what screen comes forward, but we all need to remember to mute our screens if we're not talking. Secondly, I guess on the point we're talking about now with this money, I think from a city manager's point of view, when you're managing the money that's coming in, that money is to be able to keep services going under hardship times to the city, to make sure we're not laying off our own city staff. And they've done such a great job of it. And then to hear that now that somebody thinks, well, that money should now be taken out and given as a bailout to the small businesses, I think that's not what that money was set aside for. I've had quite a few comments I wanted to make. One, I wanted to just say, I'm amazed how awesome the chamber and how much work they've done on this to do all the homework on this and put this together. And it's such a great group of people behind there that are doing this. And I just wanted to say thank you to Sherry and Scott and John and Randy and anybody else that's been working so hard on that. And to the businesses that we've had be affected by this, which is everybody, including my own, my 2 businesses I run, everybody we know, everybody's affected by this. You know, our hearts as a city council go out to you. And I think we can all relate. Some are affected more than others based on the type of business. And but it is not something anybody plans on or hopes we'd ever be facing as a country here or as the world. So I would also say that I made a comment on Saturday about it being a handout. I offended a bunch of people about using the word a handout or maybe a bailout. But I mean, if you look up the definition of what a handout is, that's what this is. Basically, it says giving something given free to a person or an organization in need. So, I mean, that shouldn't be an offensive term because that's what is being proposed here. And so I'm sorry it was offensive, but to me, I thought that was an accurate term of what we were talking about here. Let's see if I can find some points. Maybe I waited too long to talk. I should have jumped in on some of these. My big concern, and I don't think I got a good enough answer on this, was whether or not anybody that received this grant money would then still be eligible for the federal care money. I'm not convinced they would, and I think it would be horrible for them to be able to say, okay, I want some of this money from this grant money, and then it's still then they cut their own throats on getting the real money. And the money I think we're talking about, even if it's 800 people and there's 800 businesses, you know, divided by the 500,000, that's $625 a business. You know what I mean? And I don't know how many people that's going to help. Boy, the screen does keep jumping to everybody. I got Ashley in front of me now. Hi, Ashley. I don't know what determines whose picture goes on there.
I can probably address something real quick.
Okay.
I did get another email from my personal banker in regards to, I called him to discuss this. He said 100% that this would not negate anyone, and I'll share that email with all of council as well. So because, yeah, and to Councilmember Nelson's, I'm not, you know, I'm 100% trying to attach, you know, we have virtually shut down. I mean, we generate zero revenue, and we have no idea when we're going to be able to do that. So I'm 100% going to try to get in line for the government stimulus. And TJ, you know, I think the one thing that we need to keep in mind is when you say a handout or bailout, the reason why I believe that's a slap in the face to small businesses like you and me is because this was mandated by the government. We didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't bad business practice. It wasn't mismanagement of money. No, March 15th, the governor came on and said, stop doing business. So that's why a bailout and a handout is offensive, because it is the farthest thing from either one of those things. Because it's not a systemic problem that the businesses in the city of Mason were doing in order, you know, to have them cease operations. I mean, so that's why I would view it as why they probably viewed it as offensive.
And I would probably say to that, if I can jump in, is that I mean, you're a business owner. You probably have an emergency set up fund like you've seen what the city was doing all along. You know, I mean, trying to save up money for a rainy day because you never know when something like this. The term emergency fund doesn't mean you break your leg on your job and you can't work, or it's the COVID-19 crisis. It just means emergency no matter what it is, whether you caused it or whether it was caused by God or it's a tornado or this virus. It means you can't work, and now you're going to get you're going to have to tap into your emergency fund to be able to get by during those terms. So I thought that's just good business practice, and I'm sure you do it. I think everybody, and maybe even Diana would comment, most businesses do that, and that wasn't meant to be an insult to other people. I'm saying these businesses probably have that set aside that they are using right now. Maybe they're burning through it, like crazy. I don't know, especially a restaurant, but I'm just saying, let's not discount the fact that they have that, right?
Well, most average small businesses, what they have and set aside for a rainy day fund or emergency fund is 27 days. It'll be, in Scott's instance at Clybourne's, it's 21 days right now. So I'm not saying he had 27 days in reserve, but the numbers that he was talking to me about are real, they're big. And, and like I said, even inside my company, I mean, we are payroll heavy, right? And so in 3 months, it'll be $250,000. Man, that's not pocket change, right? So that's real dollars, and an average of $27 or 27 days of emergency funds. That's what small businesses operate on. They don't operate on these large margins. You know that, I know that. And I think everyone on this call should know that. So yeah, I mean, but again, preparing for what we're dealing with now is, I mean, it's just an unfair comparison to anything. I've never thought in my life that I would hear the government or the governor of my state get on and say, shut down, you're not working, you're not allowed to go out of your house, you're quarantined. I mean, I understand why, but at the same time, and we have to understand the repercussions of that. And so that's why, to echo what Councilmember Nelson and again, Councilmember Stricula, thank you so much for your leadership in getting this out and creating this type of dialogue amongst us. I'm in 100% full support of it.
And Mayor, I'm gonna keep raising my hands. I don't want to be just jumping in here. Hopefully I can still respond to that. I think, and maybe it was Dave Ramsey I hear say you should always plan on 3 months. 3 months. That's not just personally, but for your business. And so that's the goal. Now, maybe everybody aims for that and they're only ending up with 27 days, but that's the goal we're all trying to have, to do. And then let's see, another point I had was, let's see. Well, I think that's it for now.
Mayor, could I make one clarification maybe while TJ's looking at? I just want, both for the sake of employees as well as the public, the city, and this is probably my mistake in presentation, the city isn't reserving funds to buffer employees from layoffs. In fact, we are in a situation where we need to furlough some employees because we don't have the work for them. We don't have the customers, so we don't have the services. And that's, so I empathize with a lot of the difficulties folks are going through. I think the important point is there, we are buffering ourselves. We are setting aside because we're also responsible for emergency services. We have to make sure that the toilets keep flushing, and that takes people on duty. We have to make sure that we have police and fire that are getting paid to be the first responders. So the priority there for those funds, and really the priority in how we've done things since this all happened, is moving to make sure that those services are front and center, and that those obligations we have that we're still providing. It's not to buffer employees from layoffs, because we are having to deal with that reality.
Eric, to add to that, do we have some financial liability with unemployment insurance, and are some of our employees filing for that?
Yes, there are a couple of federal mandates for full-time, part-time as far as time off. There are also some what you would term expansions of unemployment benefits. I couldn't run through the math of that, those are benefits to our employees that are helpful to them. They will also be financial obligations to us. We are, unemployment's not free, and we will bear part of that burden. But we're going to take advantage of those federal benefits as well.
Yeah, so one of the counterpoints that came up Saturday is that we hadn't had a chance to really carefully look at our own internal finances, and Councilmember Nelson has commented on that today as well. And so to understand more about the impact on us as an entity is part of honoring our fiduciary obligation to this. So that kind of goes back to that, hey, you guys have analysis paralysis kind of comment. It's incumbent upon us to do that. And a good analogy, well, an okay analogy, I guess I could use, if I worked for a private company that manufactures something, let's say tissue products, and they're really doing a bang up business right now, and I have access to how funds are distributed for that company, but I don't own the company. So what if I had decided that I wanted to distribute grants to another entity to distribute? Would it be appropriate for me to make that decision without doing a careful analysis and consulting with my team? Because in other words, this public money is something that we have influence over, but we have to understand and analyze and be analytical about what the impact is to us as an entity. And we have to work together and take some time to really think this through. Another issue that came up was the concept of granting, and the comfort level that some of us as public officials had about issuing a grant instead of a loan. And I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that. I know that we could afford a grant and we could afford a loan. It sounds like the CDC is not interested in any kind of ongoing bridge loan.
If I could,
Is that am I correct in that? If it's not a grant, are you uninterested in pursuing this? If somehow council said, okay, but it needs to be a bridge loan program, what says the CDC about that?
Well, Mayor Grossman, what I will comment on is I mentioned before to make the point that we're responding to a request to put together a grant program. We are well suited to do that. We are not necessarily as well suited to administer a loan program.
Okay. Who made the request for the grant program?
I'd have to defer to Sherry. I wasn't the direct contact for that.
Okay.
Nor did we stipulate the amount. It's not that we said we should do this, and by the way, we want you to give us $500,000. So.
Okay. This being a first time for all of us, how were you approached for this grant program, Sherry? Was it generated from within the chamber, or did it come about some other way?
Well, do you mean our response today, the proposal? Is that what you're referencing?
Well, what gave you the idea initially, and then because I'm guessing that somehow you guys had to know that you would be willing to do this. Who approached you about creating the grant program? Was it an internal idea from the chamber, or was it from council, or private sector?
Well, so there was the fact that a city right down the street put something together, which was in the news, right?
Yes.
So that started not only us looking at an opportunity, but then yes, there was, council member Stricula introduced it on Saturday. And so over the weekend, we tried to develop a fully baked proposal as best as we could in response to that.
Okay.
Sorry, my cat just jumped up if it looks like I'm doing something odd. Sorry. My first awkward moment there.
Oh, we didn't even see it. That's okay. Councilmember Stricula, would you want to comment? At what point did you figure out that this is something you wanted to approach the city and the CDC?
Yeah, I went through that on Saturday, I think, in a fair amount of detail. I'm not 100% sure why that matters. Like I said, the event happened. I had an opportunity to sit in on the huddle. If you want me to repeat what I said on Saturday, I will. If that's
just
necessary.
Refresh our memories. I'm sorry if I forgot something. I just needed a quick refresher. I don't mean to be irritating or disrespectful. I just needed a refresher.
I sat through a huddle. I listened to the business owners, saw the struggles that they were going through. A lot of my clients are small business owners, saw their struggle. I was watching what's happening around us. I was watching the community come together, wondering and having conversations with my wife about what we could be doing. There was complete silence from city council the entire time this was going on. Saw the journal news article, saw it on WLWT about what Hamilton was doing. That sparked the idea that, hey, we can as a city do something. Reached out to Eric, said, hey, I've got this idea. What do you think? How about $500,000? Is that something that would put the city in undue financial stress? He said no. And went from there.
Great. Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes, Eric.
If I just speak to that, and maybe it kind of defies a simple explanation. There were in the last week to 10 days, probably 3-4 different strands of ideas, thinking, both in providing improved access to federal funds. Certainly Hamilton's gift card purchase program was part of that. There was also a discussion between at least me and the chamber with the community center, the gift card purchasing program and cross marketing. So from my perspective, I don't think there was any one, we weren't on just one path. Certainly well, 3 days ago, legislation was sought. Council hadn't seen that. We drafted some legislation. I think it was just yesterday, last night maybe. I got a copy of that to the CDC. So I think that there's been a lot of parallel paths and reacting to each other. Certainly council has not, you're still in discussion. So I don't want to say that there's a predetermined route, or that there's, you've got drafts in front of you of directions you may go.
Okay. Yeah, and I would argue that while council wasn't out in the public, I don't know that council was silent, but we have, we have to follow the sunshine laws. I did ask the city manager
from
to
council
circulate a
was silent.
statement.
Leadership
for-
from council was silent for 2 weeks. We did nothing. So
It
leadership
wasn't-
from council was silent.
The
I
leadership of
heard
council.
nothing from any one of you the entire week and a half to see what we could do. Nothing. So it was silent. We sat on our hands for 2 weeks and did nothing.
Okay,
Now we can do
Councilmember Stricula, I know I was doing some things. We were working on things behind the scenes, but we weren't able to release a public statement about the gift card program anyways. But I did ask the city manager to come up with a public statement from council. I guess it was the end of the first week, just to communicate with the public. We have to be mindful of the sunshine laws. We circulated that around to council and to get feedback, and then that was posted on our website and on social media. And we've been trying to catch up. The city staff has been working carefully and closely with the chamber, the Made to Eat Takeout Blitz. They've also been doing website updates and adjusting to all of the structural changes. And I brought some printouts, or Eric supplied those for me. Our website is being updated all of the time, and it has some great links, including links from the Made Chamber. And I'd really like to compliment the Made Chamber's website and the resources there to navigate the SBA loan process. There's a link on our website, but also you can go to the Made Chamber's website, and there is many resources there for you, including the PDF of the presentation from the government about the SBA loan application process. And Warren County also has set aside, they posted on their websites SBA loan assistance links and resources, and they have personnel there that are willing to lend a hand or ready to lend a hand to people who have questions from those at Warren County. Are there other comments related to this? Councilmember Nelson?
I just kind of wanted to go back. I have just a couple real quick. I think one thing that we have to remember too is when you're talking about they should have 3 months set aside. There's a couple of different scenarios here that, we have one business that literally just opened their doors. And so, that's will be difficult on them to have 3 months set aside. But there's 2 specific companies that I talked to today, and both of them said, you know what, this is like one of the worst times for us to be shut down, because Easter produces a lot of revenue for us. And that revenue is their peak revenue, which kind of floats them on some slower months. And it's not necessarily that they have 3 months or don't have 3 months set aside. It's really hurting, they use that revenue throughout the rest of the year to survive. And so I think we have to kind of think of that too. Also going back to if we're financially ready for it, we haven't done our homework on it, but I've looked into it and I've spoken with our finance director, and he is top notch. He's a very impressive man who knows his stuff. And you can guarantee that that's one of the first things that he has done in regards to this crisis. And he has run the numbers, and he flat out said that $500,000 isn't really going to impact our city that much. So it's gonna still keep everything moving as if nothing ever happened for the city.
That's good news. We haven't gotten a memo on that yet, but I'm sure we will. So I appreciate that. I saw some other hands. I think I saw Councilmember Bradburn.
Yes, we've, kind of chewed around on this and where we're going on this. I too would like to have opportunity. I'd like to actually have the finance director here to have some discussions on it. I understand Ashley saying 300,000 of salt. Well, it all depends. Some of those are restricted funds. I don't know if that money is restricted as roadway money. That money cannot be repurposed by state law. I think we also have to realize, I think, Diana, you said Joe said something about a 20% downturn. Is that not correct? You take.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what.
Okay.
That's how we're budgeting, or that's how the city's budgeting. Yes.
Okay, so the 20% downturn, but we also have to realize that it's just not going to be a 20% downturn for 2020. It's going to be a downturn for 2021.
Right, and that was already factored into the numbers. That was already projected out.
Okay, and before we go ahead and in my estimation, before we go ahead and make this commitment, I really would like the businesses to go ahead and apply for the federal loans and then take it from there, and also to find out how big the universe is, because I don't think we know. And I think you need to find out how big the universe is before you make a commitment. You don't say you're going to build something until you know what the price is.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've seen Scott Jones waiting patiently. Scott, would you like to comment?
Mayor, first of all, I apologize to everyone. Everything on my screen has shown that I've been on mute, so I apologize if it's been noisy on my end. I think there's two things that I'd like to comment on. I think one is a recognition of the present time frame that we're in. We have not yet seen the tidal wave of the people that are going to go without paychecks. We're 2 days away from the end of the month. So the climate that we're in right now discussing this, I think will be different than it would be in 10 days. I think the other point is, and our board spent a lot of time on the phone this weekend exchanging drafts, and there were certain times when we got frustrated. Is this the best that we can do? And the consensus that we had was yes. That, under the current circumstances, we think this is the best way that we can provide relief to small businesses. And we recognize that, we may not be able to provide relief to every single business in every circumstance, but we didn't want that to stop us from doing our best to have the greatest impact that we had. And the theme that we kept coming back to over and over again was, let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. And let's do everything that we can to make a difference. And, we're here to do that. And we would like the opportunity to partner with you all to do that.
Thank you. Well said. Let's not perfect be the enemy of good. Sometimes these conversations are long, boring, and a little bit messy, but it's not perfect, but we're all trying to learn together. Councilmember Chance.
Sure, thank you.
Sorry, I missed Sherry Taylor. Sherry, would you mind giving Sherry just a second?
No, go ahead, Sherry.
Okay. Thank you, Sherry.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I'll try to stay out of the way at this point, but there's a couple things that are weighing on my heart right now that I just couldn't go another minute without saying. And we keep talking about how the city is projecting a 20% revenue reduction. 80% of the businesses who took the survey as of yesterday have zero revenue right now. Zero. And who plans for 3 months of zero revenue starting tomorrow? It's not fair to say that you should have 3 months of reserves to where you can just all of a sudden expect your zero revenue component to come in, because nobody's ever planning for that. A 2-year-old food business has the slimmest margins, has zero cash on hand as it is. And then the fact that we talked about already that 2 of our businesses on Main Street opened within 1 month of this, it's just not appropriate, I guess. I understand and respect the reason to be prudent. Seeing my tax dollars at work is one of the many things I love about Mason, and it's one of the I chose to move here myself. But talking about business bailouts, it's extremely insensitive to the businesses that are listening right now to talk about how the city has $3 million in a fund that could be used for economic sustainability, debating how to utilize those funds. And if we go back to the math from earlier, if all 800 of those businesses qualified that we were talking about, and if they paid $2,500 in payroll tax in average, which we know that that's an average, those businesses were projected to pay $2 million to the city this year in payroll tax. And so for us to be looking at this, in this light is bothersome because it's in an economic sustainability fund. And economic sustainability refers to practices that support long-term economic growth without negatively impacting the social, environmental, and cultural aspects of the community. These businesses have paid into the city through their payroll taxes. This is not a bailout. As we've talked about many times, this is not a circumstance that any of them could have ever planned for. They're laying people off. There's tears every day. I answer a phone call every day from a business owner in tears about the choices that they are having to make. These people, they have paid into the city through their payroll tax, but they have paid into the city by improving our quality of life. And how we will ever be able to truly measure the impact if these businesses don't get out of this, it's just something that I think we should be really thinking about. And my ask is just as council and as leaders is please be careful with your words right now. These people are hurting, and that's all. I'm just gonna say that.
Thank you, Sherry. We appreciate that. Okay, Councilmember Chance.
Yeah, again, I'm not a big fan of reading to people, but to that point, Sherry, thank you. I got about 4 things to say, and when I reference Scott's email, I want all you guys to read this. But another one that stuck out to me, and this is what small business owners do, right? And looking at cash on hand and saying, yeah, in a perfect world, and by Ramsey standards, we should have 3 months. Well, listen what Scott had to do at Clybourne. No, he didn't have to do it, but he did it out of the courtesy of his employees. When we furloughed our employees, we brought all the perishable food items from all 4 of our locations to Clybourne and set up a grocery store for our teams. We gave away almost $60,000 in food to our staff over the first week we were closed to ensure that all of our people were fed. And here we are sitting here acting all high on this horse that we don't have funds to help these people. And again, and TJ, you brought up a few items to someone breaking their leg. There's a thing called insurance for that. And all those other things that you mentioned, there's insurance for that. There's disaster insurance. There's all kind of insurance. There's insurance, but there's not one line item or a bullet point inside any insurance deck page that says, hey, in the event that the government tells you to shut down. So again, we got to be careful of making those type of statements, as Sherry mentioned. And to Councilmember Strickler's point, yeah, there's other cities that have done stuff. There's other cities that have already done stuff that we have witnessed and that we have seen. And, again, from this email, Blue Ash, Montgomery, and Hamilton, they all did something. And again, so I want to close on, I think Councilmember Nelson's done a great job, getting information from our finance director and just to hear it straight from our manager, Eric. I mean, $500,000. Is that going to inhibit us moving forward in any aspect of our business?
To be clear, no, we will be able to continue to provide essential services and meet our obligations to the residents of Mason.
All right.
All these funds that we've talked about are unforgone expenses. Those aren't free. What it means at the end of the day is the amount we transfer to our capital program. So roads, parks, investment into the infrastructure will ultimately be diminished by that amount. But it is not. And residents need to hear, and council needs to understand, there's a lot of pain the city's going through because we're pivoting to make sure those emergency services, our core obligations, that we're in a position to meet those. That is why, at the end of the day, why we've been so conservative so many years, because that's the real fear, not layoffs, or not that we have to not build a park. We have to keep those critical life-saving services in position. And that means a lot of backup support, but that's why we funded the way we have. We didn't want to be, we'd be in a worse position if we were in this spot and we couldn't keep the officers paid.
Sure. So it's safe to say that
we're blessed, we're fortunate, and councils have done a lot of preparation over many years to be in the position we are today, which
Sure.
isn't a great position, but it could be much worse.
So, a 20% downturn instead of 10 million, we're going to put $8 million into our capital fund, which, golly, nobody wants to see that happen. But again, we're in uncharted territories here. So,
Councilmember Chance,
yes.
may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you have a problem with us wanting to get down to the bottom of what our financial status is and what the impact is to this entity?
What do you mean? Do I have a problem with it?
Well, you said something about people being on their high horse and asking too many questions. And I just would like to remind you that that kind of comment isn't necessary. I think it's appropriate for, if we want to be analytical about it. We didn't come up with this idea. Councilmember Stricula did. We want to learn about it. We're all listening. We've all gone out of our way to learn and grow together. And so I just want to remind council again, if we don't have any further questions about clarification of the program, I mean, I have a few about the language in the legislation that was proposed. Do we want to wrap things up now and go ahead and schedule another meeting, a regular council meeting, or do we have more comments?
I'd like to speak real quick. In all due respect, I'm probably one of the last people who knew about this, I'm thinking. Mayor, you've had conversations with Josh about it way before I even knew what was going on. I didn't hear about any of this till Saturday. From Saturday till today, I went from, I don't think we can do this, to doing all my research and everything to realize, yes, we can do it. Yes, it's a good idea. Yes, the city needs it. Our small businesses need it. Why do it, the longer, I mean, that's the problem with this council, is that we drag everything out all the time. We are all intelligent adults. We should have been able to do our homework by now and move forward. These individuals, they can't wait. By the time we say yes to this, there's still going to be a delay. They have to finish coming up with the program, how it's going to be implemented. They have to get the applications in. They have to review the applications. They have to write the checks. How much longer do we need to wait? And if you don't know the financial data and you can't trust someone who's been the chair for the last 4 years, then you should have gone and done your research prior to.
Councilmember Nelson, we all have been doing that over the past 48 hours. This has all come on quickly.
Excuse me, I am still talking. We just don't need to keep delaying the vote.
Okay, we didn't set up this work session to have a vote today, so I'm asking council, shall we go ahead and schedule a new meeting for legislation at the earliest possible opportunity? And that is my question to council, but I'll take a question from Councilmember Stricula real quick.
Really a question, but a couple of comments, because I haven't done so yet, because I've been listening to everything, and I think we're a couple of things that we're missing the point on. This was not meant to solve the economic problems created from our government shutting these businesses down. It's not meant to fix all of that. This is meant to help show that we support them, show that we support the community as a whole, and do what we can. So if all 800 companies that Councilmember Honorlaw said would apply and get $625, I promise you those 800 companies would be appreciative that they did that, or that we did that for them. Right now, what I'll also say, and we haven't mentioned the letters that we've received from the businesses, is there was a letter that came in and I shared it with everybody. Hopefully we had plenty of time to read it, because I did, and had plenty of time to read all the other letters that came in, because this is important. And I know, and we need to be prudent, and I understand, Mayor, your comment about, look, let's make sure we have all the facts, make sure we know what we're doing, and I get it. the lack of urgency is concerning. And that's the issue. I moved meetings this afternoon so I could have this meeting so that we could talk about this because it's important. And once it's done, we can move on. But so it's not meant to fix everything. That's my first comment. It's not meant to fix everything, and it's not meant to replace other programs. When I had this idea, it wasn't that the federal government wasn't going to do anything. It wasn't that the state government wasn't going to do anything, or even that insurance wasn't going to pay. It was, what can we do right now that's easy, quick, fast, and gets money in the pocket of the business owners of the community? And this is it, because another city down the street did it. And they did it in 6 days. 6 days they did it. 6 days. It's taken us 6 days just to get here.
They're handwritten checks too, handwritten checks. So that's getting it done.
Okay,
and that's my issue. Hold on, I'm not done yet. I'm not done. Again, I can't remember what the comment was that made me write this down, but these are local dollars going back to local businesses. These are money's coming in. Maybe that's been said a different way from there, but I think we've answered the question. Can we do this financially? Does this hurt the city? It doesn't. I answered that before Saturday, before we came in. And I understand that was the first time everybody heard it, and I get it. So now we've had a couple of days to digest it, look through it. We've heard now from the CDC, a very well thought out, I might add, program given the limited information that they had. It's not paralysis by analysis. I don't think it's that concerns me. What concerns me is the lack of urgency that's being shown for what we can do. I think we've answered all of the questions that have come up over and over and over again. We've spun those around. I don't know how we can answer them anymore. And with that, I'm gonna actually introduce. I want to introduce ordinance 2020-43 for us to vote on tonight.
Okay, we're going to have to refer to our parliamentarian, our law director, Jeff Forbes. We did not announce that we would be covering legislation in tonight's meeting, and we also haven't taken a careful analysis of the actual legislation, which is somewhat inconsistent, not a lot, but there are some inconsistencies with the proposal from the CDC that we might need to clean up. I was going to suggest prior to that we schedule another meeting, a public meeting at the first available opportunity to cover the legislation. And so you are proposing now to go ahead and introduce the legislation tonight. So Jeff, help us out.
Yes, so there are a couple sections that are relevant to discuss. One has to do with the council rules on special meetings, and that's what this is. It does indicate that the topic to be discussed at special meetings has to be, you have to remain within what was notified to the public. My understanding is that what was notified was that it was to discuss small business recovery opportunities, or I don't know the exact words, but it was something to that effect. So as long as whatever is being discussed and introduced is related to that topic, I think that's consistent with your council rules. But primarily with respect to legislation being introduced, that's governed by the charter. Section 4.02 of the charter states that any member of council may, at a regular or special meeting, introduce any ordinance or resolution. So pursuant to the charter, you are permitted, a council member is permitted to introduce legislation at a special meeting such as this. And if the legislation that's being suggested to be introduced is what was distributed to council, I think that's consistent with the notice of what today's topic would be. So legislation can be introduced at this meeting once, and essentially it has been by Councilmember Stricula. Once that happens, then it's the normal course of how legislation is handled by all the other remaining elements of the charter. First readings, suspension of the rules, all the normal rules would apply.
Mayor, can I make a motion to table this then?
I'll second that.
Okay, so I hear a motion to table in a second. Did we follow that protocol correctly, Jeff? You're muted. Unmute.
Sorry, I
Okay,
thought
good.
I was on mute. I hit the button. I just muted myself. Yes, here's how I would categorize what has happened. Councilmember Stricula has introduced the legislation. It's ordinance 2020 dash, and I'm sorry, I missed the number, 42, 43. That's been introduced. Procedurally then, what I heard was a motion to table that ordinance. And that motion has received a second. So it would be appropriate for discussion on that motion at this point.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any council discussion on tabling the motion?
Yes, I would like to.
I'd
discuss
just
it.
like to know the purpose and the reasoning behind tabling it.
Ashley, if I may, I'd like to bring the finance director. Mayor, can I speak?
Yes, yes.
I'd like to bring the finance director into this discussion. I need to see some numbers before I make that decision. And I also, to be honest, I really think that before we take this step, the businesses should go ahead and apply for the federal assistance first. Thank you.
Councilmember Stricula?
Yeah, if we're going to table this, can we come up with a list of, because what I don't want to have happen is us have this next meeting and then another question arises to get somebody else involved, because on Saturday, the finance director wasn't even mentioned to come in. But we wanted to hear from the CDC and we wanted to hear from the chamber. So now they're here. We've now heard from them. And now we want the finance director to come because we can't take the city manager's word that we're going to be okay.
I'm available for a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Let's get Joe.
I mean,
You have to have public notice, and please don't call out because Josh has the floor.
Yeah, and I mean, we can't take the word of another council member that she had a discussion with the finance director and he said that it was okay.
Okay,
That, I mean,
hang on one
is that
second.
not
That assigns motive. We can, of course, we take her word.
that's not. No.
That we
That's
haven't
not
had
at all.
that
That's exactly what
report.
you're saying.
Okay,
No,
no, we didn't get that report. It's not that, I think he has some questions for further clarification of our finance director.
Well, now you're speaking for him. Maybe
Well,
Councilmember
that's what
Bradbury can speak for
I
himself.
thought he said, but you're saying that we don't believe Councilmember Nelson. Of course we believe her. It could be that he needs further clarification. I'm not sure.
I need further clarification. And as I ended the discussion, I truly believe that the local businesses should go ahead and apply for the federal funds before we make this decision. And I think I'm entitled to that opinion.
Yeah, no, you absolutely can, Councilmember Bradbury, and I appreciate that. I'm wondering what difference that would make, though, based on this, because we're not saying that they shouldn't apply, right? I mean, again, I brought that up a couple of times. If we're not saying that there's not other programs out there, we're saying what can we do as a local municipality for our local businesses to show like everybody else in the community is doing, right? They're all supporting each other. And what can we do as a local municipality to support that as well?
I've heard what Hamilton's done. I've heard allegedly there was some outreach from, I guess, Blue Ash and Montgomery. I don't know what they've done. I don't know if it's a financial situation or what. I don't know if it was the gift cards that I first heard about, I think Saturday. Maybe I heard about it a day before. So, you know, haste should not make waste. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councilmember Stricula, do you have anything else? We can come back to you if you think something else. I saw.
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, I saw Councilmember Honderlaw's hand.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. No, I just wanted to, one, get a little more feedback, not just from the small business owners, but, you know, it's the taxpayers' money, not just the small businesses. So I'd like to be able to talk to everybody on how they feel about how this situation were to happen. So I want to look into it more. And plus, I think I heard that Councilmember Chance say that the city of Montgomery and the city of Blue Ash did do something. I would like to look into see what it was they did. I know, the only thing I know is that Hamilton gave gift cards, and I would not be in favor of a gift card solution like Councilmember Nelson said. I don't think that's if I understood her correctly, I don't think that's an appropriate way to do that. But so I just, yeah, that's why I tabled it.
Well,
Councilmember Stricula, real quick, and then we'll get to Councilmember Chance.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a suggested gift card program. So I think we're good there. And what residents, did you want to hear from all 33,000 residents or just 18 and older? Do you have criteria for that? I mean, again, I just want to know if we can outline, I think it's a good point. It's a great point. If we can outline exactly the questions that we want answered, so we can get the people here to answer those questions so we can make a decision, because that's where we need to be, is we need to make a decision. All right, so whatever those questions are, Councilmember Bradburn wants to hear from the finance director. Let's get him here. Councilmember Arlaw wants to hear from all the residents, so maybe we can get all 33,000 on the Zoom call.
Councilmember Stricula.
Whatever, I mean.
Well, that's legit.
No,
I mean,
I'm asking the question.
Did you really think that that's what he meant?
It's
sarcastic. It's not helpful.
I'm just trying to bring some levity. I'm just trying to bring some levity to it, but I'm just trying to bring it.
Well,
oh, okay.
I mean,
I didn't know that.
This is so what, but my point is let's list out those questions. We've got one. We need the finance director here. Councilmember Arlaw would like to figure out what programs other cities have done because he wants to. So let's figure that out. How do we do that? And what is that time frame in which we can do it? So we can answer those questions, we make a decision to move forward. That's why I pushed the legislation tonight, because we need to make a decision. And if we're going to do nothing, then let's do nothing. But let's make a decision. Sorry, Mr.
Okay.
Kramer has something.
Councilmember, well, wait a minute. We can't take any commentary from Mr. Kramer just yet because we have a motion on the floor. Councilmember Chan?
Yeah, well, I won't need a comment back, but I think it's pretty simple to have a box checked on our application that says, I've applied for the SBA loan or the CARES package. Can we just please add that to our application? I think that's a pretty simple solution. Secondly, I don't care what other business or what other municipalities are doing. The bottom line is they're doing something. And so we want to sit on our hands again and just, let's go back and let's go talk to them. Let's go talk to them. Let's go talk to them. While every one of our businesses are shut down, not generating any revenue. And I apologize, Mayor, if I come across, I am passionate about this. And I apologize if I come across as, not properly, conveying myself without, but I'm just, it's the same old dance. I mean, we sit here and going in circle after circle after circle. Councilmember Nelson was prudent. She sat down with Joe. We sat here, our city manager, who is I mean, goodness gracious, he is in the fight day in and day out, hour, and he knows our finances. He knows everything much better than collectively everyone on this call again. And his opinion is we're fine, but here we are, we continue just to drag this thing out. And if we want to table it for you to have that conversation, let's get a meeting. If we want to talk tomorrow night at 9 p.m., I'm willing to do that. If we want to talk tomorrow night at 10 p.m., I'm willing to do that. Let's get Joe on the phone so we can get this thing, at least we can get voted on. Does anyone know where Vice Mayor Gilb is? I would love to know his insight.
But it would be nice if he could be at our meeting.
We've had two.
We have legislation. I'm not sure, but because these came on so fast, I don't think he could work it out with his schedule. I'm not sure. Okay, are you done? We haven't heard from Councilmember Nelson on this motion yet.
Well, we can get Joe in Zoom right now if anybody wants to be patient and get Joe.
Get him.
I could tell you my conversation with him. He actually said at the end of 2020, we're projected to have, even with the reductions and the reworking of the numbers with the coronavirus, that we are still supposed to have a $4 million surplus for 2021. And it's supposed to be a $6 million surplus. I'm sorry, for 2020 is 4 million and 2021 is 6 million. And so I think that, 500,000 giving it back to our small business is kind of a no-brainer. It would be nice though, the next meeting, if we can do our homework and so we can move this along and not delay. I mean, either vote yes or vote no. Let's move it forward. Mason always has set the bar high, and we are a very strong community and a well-respected community. We have the greatest school system, one of the greatest school systems in Ohio. We have great property values. We have a lot of really great businesses here. And, you know, we need to be unique in what we do, and we need to just continue forward and think about our residents. And so I am completely for this. I am not for stalling this vote, but I mean, I'm ready to vote on it tonight, but I mean, if you guys want to get Joe in, you know, I'm sure we could do that. I don't know, are we able to do that, or?
We're still on the motion on whether or not to table, so.
Okay, so I am not for tabling it. I think that we you know, we're smart people. We don't need to spend a ton of time trying to research this and drag it out. I mean, I say let's do it tonight.
Okay, everyone I think on council has had a chance to comment on the motion to table, so I'm going to take the liberty of commenting on that motion. Couple of thoughts. It would be nice to have Vice Mayor Gilb here, and we can try to schedule another meeting at the earliest possible time. In that intervening time, we can get a memo or a report from our finance director, because the rest of us weren't in that dialogue with Councilmember Nelson, and we do take her comments in good faith. I'm sure she's correct on that, but it would be great, especially for Vice Mayor Gilb, to have a memo along that line. We also have now the plan from the CDC, which is brand new to us. So I think we all tried to do our homework. We just got everything really quickly, and it takes a little time to be analytical and digest. And there are some inconsistencies between this proposal from the CDC and the actual legislation. There's some typos in the legislation, some different things we might want to clean up. So for those reasons, I'm in favor of tabling so that we can do a little bit more work on cleaning up this document and then take it in for a vote on legislation. So we need to take a roll call on the motion to table. Eric, can you do that for us? So we're voting only on the motion to table at this time.
Councilmember Nelson,
No.
Councilmember Chance,
No.
Councilmember Bradburn,
Yes.
Councilmember Hunterlaw,
Yes.
Councilmember Stricula,
No.
Mayor Grossman.
Yes.
3-3.
Jeff.
What
That,
happens since we don't have Vice Mayor Gilb?
right, so that was a 3-3 vote. That means that the motion to table fails. So at this point, the ordinance has been introduced, and as I mentioned before, we would just proceed with the normal course of business addressing a piece of legislation that's before this body. I know we likely do not have the normal script that we would follow. Mayor, I know at a typical meeting, you would have sort of that script that we would follow. So I'll try to help through that process the best I can. Normally, the first thing that council would entertain typically is a motion to read by title only. And I'll just point out for all of council, these motions that we typically do to suspend certain rules by the charter, these require 5 votes. So I'll just point that out. And so at this point, what council would normally consider is a motion to read by title only.
So we take roll for that.
Mayor, I would suggest doing a roll call for all of these normal things, just because we're not in the same room and it's difficult to tell. It's probably better to just do a roll call on everything going forward, even though normally we would do a voice vote.
Okay, a motion to read ordinance 2020 was it 43? By title only.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, so now we're going to take a roll call.
All right.
And Jeff, just to be clear, if this motion fails, that then means we read the entire ordinance.
Correct.
Councilmember Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Bradburn,
Yes.
Councilmember Hunterlaw,
Yes.
Mayor Grossman,
Okay. No, because there's so many typos in this and inconsistencies. I'm sorry. I don't want to read it by title only. I think we should go through it carefully. But continue, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Stricula,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Okay, so that the motion to read by title only would pass, which means at this point, I will read ordinance 2020-43 by title only, authorizing the city manager to enter into a service agreement in the amount of $500,000 with Mason Deerfield Chamber Community Development Corporation and declaring an emergency. It has now been read by title only. Generally speaking, the next thing that council historically would undertake is a motion to suspend the rule requiring 2 readings and allow for adoption after 1 reading.
Okay, and what is required for that motion to pass?
That is also 5 votes.
5 affirmative votes.
Yes.
Okay, so I need a motion to suspend the rule and adopt after first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, call the roll.
sorry. Councilmember Bradburn,
No.
Councilmember Hunterlaw,
No.
Mayor Grossman,
No.
Councilmember Stricula,
I'll be the first yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Chance,
Yes.
Jeff.
Okay, then pursuant to the charter, that motion would require 5 affirmative votes to pass. It did not receive five affirmative votes, which means essentially what you've done is had a first reading of ordinance 2020-43. Normal course is that would then be subject to a second reading at a subsequent meeting. I will point out, pursuant to the charter, that typically the second reading of an ordinance is supposed to be at least 6 days after the first reading.
Okay.
There is a provision in the charter to suspend that rule, but again, that takes 5 affirmative votes. So
I'll make that motion. I'll make that motion.
just if I could, Mayor, just to clarify, so the motion is, I guess, to suspend the rule requiring 6 days in between readings. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to make sure we understand what we're doing. Is that?
Yeah, me? Are you asking
Yeah,
me?
I'm sorry. Yes, I want to clarify. Is that the motion you're making?
Do I have an opportunity to say something?
Just need to make the motion. What's your
I
motion?
did. I made the motion. Yeah, I don't want to wait 6 days. I think if there's typos, we can get that done in 6 minutes. So I don't want to wait 6 days.
Well,
And-
there's
and-
more
and-
typos.
What?
There are
why-
more typos. We could have had a meeting in 24 hours from now had you been patient, but this needs to be cleaned up.
Patient. Go sell that to everybody that's out
Well,
there.
now we're in the 6
So-
days mode. We need to be
If I
careful
can-
and have a good product. And
If I
it needs a
can-
little tweaking. Okay,
I'll
what's your
second
motion?
I'll second the motion. So does that that can get us back on track to giving enough time to Councilmember Bradburn and Councilmember Arnold to get the information that they need? Because then we can suspend that 6-day rule. We can vote on that. We could go back to the 24 hours, right? I mean, I feel like there's some politics being played here.
Jeff, is it a,
That's timing motive.
I'm new to the game. I'm just trying to figure it all out.
Thank you.
Jeff, I'm just curious, is that a separate rule? I mean, the motion to suspend the rule for the second reading includes the 6 days. Can they suspend just the 6-day portion of that rule? And then that's just the equivalent of having passed the other motion.
Well, no, the first motion would have allowed for adoption after one reading. And that motion failed. So a second reading is going to be required.
Okay, I see.
And the charter basic rule says that second reading has to be at least 6 days after the first reading. However, there is a provision in the charter that says that council may, by a vote of not less than 5 of its members, dispense with the requirement that it receive its second reading at least 6 days after the first reading. So that's yes, I'm sorry, to answer your question, it is a separate issue that would receive a separate motion. And you'll still have to have a second reading, but
no time frame attached. That could occur at any subsequent meeting.
yes.
So we just need the 24-hour notification period. Okay, so we have that motion on the floor. We need to call the roll.
Councilmember Hunterlaw,
No.
Mayor Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Stricula,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Can you say exactly what we're voting on? Because I think we're confused. And how come we can't just change the spelling? If it's a spelling error, can't we just correct it?
It's so lengthy. We've already been doing this for 3 hours. I would need to take a break personally, but we just need to go through the draft from top to bottom. There's just some errors in it and some inconsistencies, and we just could clean it up.
Why don't we take a break back in an hour? I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. I mean, if we got to take a break for an hour, clean it up. If it's spelling mistakes, if there's a comma that needs to go there,
That's
do it.
not helpful.
Why isn't it helpful?
I thought we were going to bring. I think
The motion on the floor. The motion on the floor is to suspend the rule, I believe, of not waiting 6 days so that we can reconvene at the earliest possible time. Hopefully, we'll have another member there at that time. So in essence, it's equivalent to tabling it had we done so in the first place. So we need to have a second reading. I think we had 2 votes and it's Councilmember Nelson's turn. So do you want to suspend the rule to wait 6 days?
a yes vote means we could act on it at our next meeting.
Yes.
Whenever that.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Bradburn,
You're muted.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, so that motion passes. So now we need to schedule our second reading, our next meeting with a second reading. And we'll work on that. We'll get back to council on that exact time and we'll give due adequate public notice. Homework, we need a memo or some type of report from our finance director.
No,
Yes.
I would like him. I would like him at the meeting.
You would like him at the meeting as well. That's great. Okay. And I would like to have a memo if that's okay. Just a report on this would be great. We've got our information from the CDC now, so that's very helpful. We can compare that to the legislation. Eric.
can I ask what, and I don't want to lead the question. Maybe I'll tell you, I will ask Joe to put together some scenarios that we've worked on as far as, and these are scenarios, what the financial impact of what we know so far on the COVID-19 situation could have on this year's operating budget. and then some overview similar to what we discussed here on the status of our operating funds. Is there more that you would like prepared by Joe?
Anyone else? Is there anything helpful from our economic development department that someone may want? Okay, I don't see any hands on that. Okay, so we'll work on that. And then I have a question about submitting amendments to fix some inconsistencies. Could that be sent via email prior to the meeting? Or do we need to make the amendments on the floor, or a combination of both?
To amend it, you need to do that in a meeting. If it were helpful to folks to, if it's fixing typos or something, I think you could give those to me and we could compare, kind of put together a redlined, amended version to give to you for the next meeting. Jeff?
Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, there's some different things in there, and there are a few phrases that I think need to be looked at. So if you all could take a careful look and redline what you think needs to be redlined, and we'll try to throw something together as quick as we can. So we've got next possible meeting. Hopefully that's within, as close to 24 hours as possible. It's 7 o'clock on Monday night. So, we'll get to it as quickly as we can. I don't think anyone, at least not me, I don't have the desire to delay or be difficult or obstinate. And I'm trying to accommodate everyone, because I've got some people that want this done right away, and I've got some people that want more time to be analytical. So I hope that came across as being fair-handed in moderating this meeting. That was my intention anyways. Is there anything else we see, Josh Stricula?
Mayor, you mentioned the homework with the finance director. Councilman Member Honorlaw also asked to receive comments from residents. So I don't know if we can just publicly ask for that, similar to, I think the request of the last meeting was to hear from business owners. So
yeah,
ask for residents to email in.
Yeah, emails would be great. He doesn't have, it's nice to be able to talk about this with people. Obviously, we can't get to the entire city in one day, but one of the great things about having a first reading and a second reading is it also gives the public time to weigh in on that. So that's an important part of our transparency process. So we'll all hit the ground running and try to get as much information as we can. Now we have no more motions on the floor, and I did see a couple of hands from our guests. So how about we start with Scott Jones? I think I saw him first maybe, and then we'll follow with John. Scott, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. For the next meeting, would it be helpful to have the CDC board, or as many of us as possible, to be there? Because I think, speaking on behalf of the board, we'd be happy to do that as schedules permitting.
Sure. Yeah, it'd be great to have at least one representative. It's been very helpful today, and we're very grateful. And I know you all moved heaven and earth to put this together and to be able to report to us and answer our questions. And for that, we're all grateful. John,
we appreciate that, Mayor. And I think one of the things that we were looking at this weekend was, there have been a lot of analogies tonight, and one was a recognition for us that, if we're stuck on an island and we're looking to build a ship, is the ship that we would build the same if we were going to get on that ship in 6 months, as opposed to the island being on fire? And we think the island's on fire right now. And so that is, really the reason why we wanted to get something to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much. John?
Thank you, Mayor Grossman. My earlier, and I apologize for breach of protocol, but my only question was going to be, or request, as council was continuing to discuss and decide whether to move forward, and if so, what are the level of impact and so on. I think Scott pointed out that we would love to be part of the whatever final developments, so that we could get, a couple of decisions to be made. If the answer is yes to do something, great. If the answer is further yes to pursue the grant approach, we think that's even better. And then any other elements that we need to be aware of it relative to specific criteria that you would want or expect to have part of whatever proposal or plan we would put together. So there were some questions about, do you require an entity to demonstrate that they have filed for other assistance prior to doing that? I'm not going to debate whether I agree or disagree with that, but that would just be an example of, if there's a criteria that we need to be aware of, we would need to make sure that we can incorporate that to continue to preserve the intent of speed and simplicity that I've heard many people say already today, and we said in our comments as well. We are trying to drive as much as we can the speed and simplicity relative to whatever impact. And if the value of the gift or the grant or the package is going to be something different than what we have come to understand, let us know that as well. And if there's any other criteria relative to minimum or maximum amounts to be awarded, we would just want to make sure we incorporate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the CDC? Thank you for your patience. This has been a long meeting. We really appreciate it. I think that's a wrap. We will be in touch with details on the next meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Jason, are you still there?
Yes, I'm ending the meeting now.
Okay. Thanks, Jason.